Okay,
We don't want to be here later.
we're going to call this meeting to order and ask Pam for a roll call at 6:04.
Okey-dokey, let me find my list. Are we recording, Daryl?
Gave us a thumbs up.
Yeah, I'm not showing it starting here as my deal.
We need to
There
go anyway.
All righty. Gary Tenenbaum,
Here.
Bill Infante,
Here.
Katie Schwer, Auden Schendler,
Here.
Jennifer Riffle, Ryan Slack,
Here.
Jackie Whitsitt.
Here.
Go.
We always like to thank Grassroots for recording our meetings, and I know that's going to happen soon. If you miss it on the live version right now, you can go to www.grassrootstv.org and catch the reruns. Our videographer this evening is Ryan O'Donnell, so we got a Ryan, and a Ryan. And the mayor's coffee is scheduled tomorrow at 8 a.m. at Cece's Cafe. If our town manager is not going to be able to make it, I think we're going to.
No, I'll be there tomorrow.
Oh, okay, so we're going to say it's like 8 to 8:30. If anybody wants to come join us to ask questions or give us a piece of your mind, that would be totally awesome. Okay, our first item is the consent agenda. Does anybody have questions on the consent agenda, or is there a motion?
Mayor, I move the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So, our next item is a call to the public for folks who would like to talk for 3 minutes about something that is not on the agenda. Okay, would you like to come up and introduce yourself at the mic? That would be great. Beatrice? Huh?
My name is Beatrice Soto, and I am here this afternoon to kind of share a project we're putting together, which is the Latino Chamber of Commerce and Community Engagement.
Basalt Latino?
This is a Roaring Fork Valley,
Okay, great.
valley-wide, and we decided, and feel free to ask any questions at any point. We felt kind of the Latino community is spread out throughout the valley, basically from Aspen to Parachute, and you guys are very much aware how this valley works and how people move around, and versus just having a town-specific organization, we figured it's better to do community-specific and just as wide as people kind of move around. So the mission is that we are a multicultural business organization committing to fostering a healthy business environment, enhancing cross-cultural collaboration, and increasing opportunity and prosperity for all through education, programming, and multi-level community bridge building.
Great.
So really what we're trying to do is figure out at this point what we can do to help our towns and municipalities and counties to better engage with the Latino community and being a self-sufficient organization that empowers the community, the Latino community itself. So our purpose is to create representation, empowerment, local leadership, as well as respect and community bridge building amongst the Latino community and all the other Anglo community throughout our valley. At this point, we have talked to Pitt King County, and they are very interested in public safety and health and human services, as well has had a hard time engaging with the Latino community. So what we're trying to do is just kind of build a resource center where we can share with the Latino community in a safe fashion what services are available, because a lot of people are unaware of what is available, and there's a lot of resources throughout our valley, and unfortunately it's not really getting to the community because of the means of communication. We lack newspaper. And so we figure through a website is another way to really allow people to visit and be aware of what's available to them. So we're coming here today to ask for your support and see if there's any way that we can help the town of Basalt just engage more with their community and just see if there's any specific concerns or issues that Basalt is specifically having a harder time engaging with the Latino community as well.
Okay, well, thank you, Beatrice. Have you also hooked up with the individual chambers?
We have,
Okay, just because I think that would be a great network for you as well.
yes.
And it
we
looks
do
like you have a good board.
Yes. So we do have the support from the other chambers because we don't want to be necessarily competing. It's not about getting rid of their support or trying to like shift people that are already supporting different chambers. This is a little bit more community oriented, and we feel that can really strongly be supported by the Latino businesses throughout our valley and businesses that are starting to offer services specifically for the Latino community that have services in Spanish. So I feel like it's just a little bit of a different community that we're trying to engage.
That was our 3-minute warning, but I'm going to see if anybody has any questions. Auden?
Yeah, one thing that would help you and help us would be if you could work on encouraging Basalt citizens who are Latino to run for council. You know, and that representation would bolster this organization, and it is needed. In the next election, there's got to be a Latino candidate for council.
And I think that's an excellent point. Another big part of the programming that we want to do is to engage with Latinos and let them feel empowered and kind of guide them to civic participation and how things work. But again, kind of in a safe scenario where people can ask questions and maybe in their language and just try to guide people to be more civically engaged. This is something that the city of Glenwood Springs has also requested, and they're trying to get more people on their boards. So that is a top priority on our list.
I think our citizen boards too, even for all of us, most of us started out on a citizen board of some kind before we ran for council. So I would say run that up the post at all your towns and counties that you're dealing with. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For coming. Other people with comments for items not on the agenda? Yes, ma'am.
This is public comment, right?
It's public comment.
Okay, I was late, I'm sorry, I didn't have a big fat public comment. A year ago, I went to the BPAC with Peggy Bear about a sculpture that her husband's parents wanted to donate to the town of Basalt. And BPAC told me to go to Post, and Post didn't tell me to go anywhere. They were apparently doing a great big giving garden about consolidating all the giving and everything. And neither Peggy or I have heard anything about this sculpture, so I would like to just tell you briefly. It is to be a gift from David Bear's parents. It is to be a life-size, bronze, generic fly fisherman, fish on a hook, net in hand, hat on head, designed and created by Howard Neville, who's quite a well-known sculptor from the Granby area. This is a complete donation to the town of Basalt, along with its installation, and it's a fund for its maintenance. And I request that you all please step to the plate and give the Bears some sort of feedback or answer. They have heard nothing, and David's parents are upset.
Thank you for
Okay.
coming in and sharing that with us. And I see staff writing this down, so maybe we can circle back. Other comments for items not on the agenda? Intro.
I was going to do that during my manager's.
okay.
but
All right.
We can.
Okay. Anybody else? Comments not on the agenda? Okey-doke. Let's see. Mayor and council reports and comments? Anybody? Okey-dokey. Check. Manager's report.
Yeah, thanks. So I have several items to share, but first, wanted to bring Rick Fout up just briefly. So Rick is our new building official who just started last week. So he hails from Glenwood Springs, and he's been doing this for quite some time, and before that was actually one of the people on the other side, a contractor for a number of years, so he kind of knows both sides.
Excellent.
And ended up being a good find for us, and is a little less than a week in, tomorrow will be his 1 week, but he's doing well and keeps showing up for work, so that's a good thing.
Thank you so much for joining us with all your experience, and you're a local, and you have moved to Basalt,
Yes, I have.
which is always a good sign.
Blessing for me.
It's a sign that you may be thinking of staying.
I like to live and work and hang out in a small area.
Yes.
As Ryan said, I used to be a contractor and I was all over the place.
And you're tired of that.
But when I kind of settled into the building department career, I honed it in.
Excellent.
And so that's what's been most wonderful about here. And working with all you good people, so
Thank you so much.
keep me posted.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rick. A couple other just quick updates. The community pool opened up this last weekend with some interesting weather, but the pool water at least was nice and toasty warm. So we did get some kids that braved the elements to come down. So it will now be open for the rest of summer. A couple meeting announcements on May 30th, so that's this Thursday evening. We're having an open house as part of the master planning process. That's the third of 3 of the bigger community meetings, and that is being held at RMI, right? This one. And what time does it start? Sorry.
5:30.
5:30.
On 5:30.
5:30. Oh, that's right. I should remember that. 5:30 on 5:30.
Sorry, Ryan, that's Thursday?
This Thursday, 5:30 RMI.
There's plenty of games for families to bring kids.
Yes. So
all right.
yes. Thank you, Gary.
And tell them that we're gonna do it in the.
You tell them that part.
Okay, so we've been building on work that's been done at the prior open houses, so there's new information and new activities for people to participate in. Even the kids get to participate in the master plan. And there's gonna be like an interactive voting using your cell phone, so come on down, check it out.
Thank you so much.
And then the following week on June 4th at 6 p.m., the Planning Commission is going to hear updates so far on the master planning process. That will be here in this building, and they want to invite the town council to join them as part of a sort of a joint meeting on those updates, and that starts at 6 p.m. So we will go ahead and make sure we do all the noticing for that so that you all can attend that. And then the last meeting that I'll share is June 6th at the high school from 6 to 8:30. That will be CPW holding a meeting for the community to talk about their progress so far on the shooting range. So they've had their community group working for about the last 6 or 8 months, coming up with both short-term and long-term solutions to a shooting range. And so they'll roll out that information. And
You said that was also at 6, Ryan?
that one is 6, yes. June 6th, 6.
Oh, no, not another 6 and 6. Did you guys?
Yes, so I'll leave it
Catchy.
at that for now. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to our presentations this evening. And for those of you who may not be aware, we have had some conversations of late about Tabor issues. And we have called in several subject matter experts. And one of these is here with us this evening, Bill Ray. And he's got a presentation that he wants to share with us. So, Bill, do you want to?
Sure, thank you.
Here?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thanks for having me up again. Ryan, Christy, how are you? So the last time I was here about a month ago, I presented the results of the community survey that we worked on together. And then part of that conversation was that we needed to get an update on a timeline, kind of what are the key dates ahead, and then also what are kind of the rules of the road and what can and can't be done as part of working on a ballot question. So I put together a short presentation for you all. Would be happy to take any questions about it, and then Any other discussions that you want on the Tabor process and anywhere else I can help with that? Do we have a clicker? Thanks. Appreciate it. The right button there. All right. Yeah, there we go. So the first slide I put together is the key dates, because there are some important dates that we can't miss if the council and the town wants to keep the process moving along. So first of all, with June coming up, that's a good time to, have the discussions about the direction the town and the council want to go in, start developing ballot language and putting that together if that's the direction. The first key date is July 26th, and that is a very hard deadline that you have to notify 2 county clerks, both in Eagle County and Pitkin County, that you plan to have an election. Now, you can always decide not to, but they need to know that so that the clerks can start preparing the ballot. It is a coordinated election because it spans 2 counties and is required to be, and there will be a general election for the state in November, so it'll be a coordinated election by the clerks. Since September 6th is also a hard deadline, that is the deadline, the last day for the town to actually take the action to file a ballot question and notify a clerk through a resolution that you're going to have a ballot question. But I backed that up and looked at your council meetings kind of leading up to the 6th. So I have August 13th and August 27th in there for you all for your first and second readings on potential ballot language, so that you make sure not to miss that September 6th deadline. September 23rd is important because the town will need to provide a Tabor statement, the impacts of any planned questions, and then there are pro and con statements that will be put into what's called the county's white books, and so that's a deadline. Members of the public can submit pro and con statements to the county. Any individuals, organizations can do that. That's not just a deadline for the town. So the community should also be aware of that deadline. Then October 14th is when mail ballots will go out. That's when voting will begin. And then Election Day is on November 5th. I always think it's important that as you start to have your conversations about a ballot question and possibly moving forward, is that you do need to keep in your mind what other communities and what other political entities might be looking at on the ballot as well. So, because none of this happens in a vacuum, and voters have multiple choices and multiple considerations when they get the ballot. So just so you know right now, the only things that are settled are the state of Colorado will the legislature referred to measures, both of them taxing measures. You can only deal with taxing measures in an odd numbered year, which is a Tabor requirement. So they have Proposition CC, which is a debrucing exemption from Tabor for the general fund for the state of Colorado. And then Proposition DD, which will set up a tax for sports betting at the mountain casinos. Bless you. So the reason that has to be voted on is because it would create a new tax for any sports betting. And then there are a handful of citizens initiatives. Only one has been approved for signature collection. At this point, it doesn't look like a lot of signatures are being collected. It is I believe it's a use of tobacco and nicotine revenue to pay for kindergarten is the one that was approved for signature collection. So then you should also consider and watch if Eagle County is going to do any measures, if Pitkin County is going to do any measures, and if you have any other fire or special districts. Now, your rec district did one last year, so probably not. But just keep an eye on that because voters have to take all those into consideration. Point out. Okay, will do. I think one of the most important conversations we have to have, though, is kind of the do's and don'ts, what we can do, what you can do as a town, as a local government in this process. And the basis of that is called the Fair Campaign Practices Act, which is a state law that governs campaign finance. It restricts how public entities spend money. It restricts how elected officials and employees of a local government can either utilize public resources, money, or their own time in a political or campaign setting. It prohibits the spending of any money on a candidate election. It does also apply to referred questions, so Tabor-style questions that you might be considering. There's a restriction on spending public money applies when the ballot issue has been formally adopted and sent to an election. So at this point, we're not in that phase because you as a council have not officially voted on a ballot question and sent that to the clerks to be placed on the ballot. There we go. Yeah. So what can the town do right now? So the town and its employees can engage in community outreach to develop the public policy around a potential ballot question. You can do surveys and mailers, which you've already done. You can do community meetings, which you've already done. You can have working groups to solicit more feedback. You can develop a policy paper, FAQs. You can put a page on your website, which you've already done. You could research and write the ballot language. You can also announce the election through press releases and outreach to the community. The town's active role must stop upon referral. That starts this Fair Campaigns Practices Act process. That point, an issue committee, so a campaign, if for lack of a better word, would have to take over the process of engaging voters and moving the issue forward toward election day. After the ballot question is referred, council members, you're still allowed to use your official title and your official position to campaign for the measure. As elected officials, you have a lot more leeway. You can, of course, use all your personal time, personal funds toward a ballot question. You can use your title. You can use mayor, councilor, in any kind of communications you want to do. Town employees, on the other hand, cannot. So if Ryan, for example, wanted to volunteer some time, he should probably not write town manager on that. He should just be a citizen. Employees can answer unsolicited questions. You can get a call from the media, a call from the public, a call from another, a neighboring jurisdiction or a special district asking you questions, and you can ask those. If you're going to use your personal time as a town employee to work on the issue, I would highly recommend after it's referred that you're taking personal time off, that you're making note of that, especially like if you're going to do something on your lunch break or something like that. And I always recommend, for in this instance, your town manager puts together a memo and gets it out to all the town employees so they know the rules of the road, and that's a memo that I can help Ryan and Christy craft for the town. So, and that memo basically, Colorado Municipal League and other organizations like that provide the language for that to make sure that you're compliant. After the ballot question is referred, what can the town as a governmental entity do? Not much. You can only expend public monies to distribute a factual summary of the ballot issue, and it must include arguments for and against the measure. So if you're going to do something after you refer it, like send a mailer to everyone in the community announcing that you've done it, you actually have to construct comments for and comments against in it. And you cannot have any discussion, conclusion, or recommendation on how to vote. The town, however, you can, as a town council, you can separately also have a resolution of support for the question, and you are allowed to announce that resolution via traditional methods that you already use. If you send out a press release, if you send out a community email, post it on your website or Facebook page, you can do those traditional things. You can't do anything above and beyond what you normally traditionally do with like a press release and a council action. So those are the basic rules of engagement. I always think it's really important to follow them because it's very prescriptive and it's just unnecessarily to get to violate any of those because it can confuse and kind of get in the way of the process, which needs to be a collaborative process with the community.
Thanks, Bill. Questions from council?
I had
Bill?
one bill just backing up to basically the creation of an issue committee. And I guess, is my understanding accurate that as of July 26th, when we refer this, it's not July 26th, it's the later date?
It would be
August 13th?
the second reading where you make your final determination to refer a question.
Okay, so after August 27th then,
Yes,
the
sir.
town can spend no more money on education awareness, engagement, anything else, for all practical purposes, which includes retaining your services. That would have to be referred to an issues committee or what you could kind of call a political action committee.
Right.
How does that get formed?
So typically it's 2 or more residents who go on the Colorado Secretary of State's website and fill out the paperwork. It's pretty easy. Then you just need to go to a bank, like a local community bank, and see if they'll let you, get you a simple checking account in order to be able to accept funds, accept campaign donations so that you can execute a campaign.
And in your experience for towns like ours, do such committees come about spontaneously? Does council identify people who are willing? And then how do they get funded going forward?
Yeah, so typically, even in small elections like this, as you know, I work on a lot of these all the way from small towns to large school districts. And it's generally a handful of community leaders, supporters of either the school district or the town or the county want to set up a Citizens for the Town of Basalt campaign and put that together. They usually work with someone like myself to kind of go through the, what steps need to be taken to do that and put that organization together. It's a really important step so that you're also at that point also following the law, and if you're going to run a campaign, that you're doing the transparency and disclosure that is required of campaigns in Colorado. So by setting up a proper issue committee and registering that with the Secretary of State, you are doing a regular report on contributions and expenditures so that there's ultimate transparency also on that part of the process so that the community can see who has donated. Who is the registered agent? Who's the responsible person I should call if I have questions about the campaign? That's all listed in public record through the Secretary of State's website. And so expenditures and contributions are transparent to the community as well.
And just November, RAFTA had their campaign that they won. And many of the board members were on the issues committee. Many of the staff on their own time worked all night long on some of this stuff, along with citizens and leaders. But when you think about the people who care the most, they kind of need to be on the issues committee to get some of this work done and take some leadership role.
So I guess the question for us then is, how are we going to construct this issues committee or citizen committee, and when do you want to discuss that?
Not here.
Correct.
Outside of here.
Not here.
Okay.
That would be on town time and money if we discuss it here. We discuss it
That's
on our own time.
after referral.
You discuss it tonight, you just can't discuss it here.
Because after we leave a public forum that's noticed, no two of us can get together without noticing. So you end up with this kind of funky
Yeah.
circumstance.
Well, we went through that with RAFTA. As you know, I worked with RAFTA on it. And because we wanted RAFTA board members, because they represented their individual communities, which with RAFTA having 7 communities was a really important part of that process. We actually did public notice on our campaign meetings. We filed, according to the way RAFTA announces public meetings, we publicly announced our campaign meetings. No one outside of, who we expected there attended, but we still followed Colorado open records laws because that's transparent and
You have
accountable.
to do that. So although we won't discuss it tonight, shall we add it to the agenda sometime soon?
I think I would be happier if we didn't discuss it here, because we have staff support here, and that is campaign talk, as far as I'm concerned, but let's ask Bill.
Yeah, that would be kind of my recommendation, that it's discussed in a different forum, and if it needs to be noticed, I would take that. If more than 2 of you want to have a conversation about setting up a campaign together, then I would notice it and follow the, open meetings.
To look to Jeff for guidance. Sure.
Yeah, I think so. Anybody else? Thank you so much, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're around in the morning, I'll buy you coffee. If you're
I'm
up.
having coffee with Ralph.
Ralphie?
Yeah, sure.
Tell him hello.
I will. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okey-dokey. Our next item is a Resolution 23, a resolution of the town granting sketch plan approval, considering sketch plan approval for the Basalt River Park development. James and Ryan. Okay. Sorry.
Went out to get the applicant, so the applicant should be here shortly.
We're a little ahead of schedule.
But they're here, I think.
I think so.
Are we way ahead?
6:52.
Oh, we're not way ahead.
He's coming.
He's, okay.
Yeah, yeah, and come on, sit up here. And actually, make room for one more chair.
Q&A.
Hello. Good evening.
Hello, council.
James, would you like to introduce
Yes, I
yourself
will.
and your friends?
Absolutely. We've got Tim Belinsky here this evening, as well as Robin Schiller from CCY Architects, representing the applicant group. So this is a continued public hearing on an application submitted by Basalt River Park LLC and the Roaring Fork Community Development Corporation for CSC sketch plan approval. And it's to construct a mixed-use development on a portion of the former Pan and Fork Mobile Home Park site, known as the CDC property. Process-wise, the application requires 2 rounds of review by the P&Z and Town Council, and we're still at the first round of review, the sketch plan portion of it. The last time the council met and reviewed the project was early April. And Bruce Kimmel, the town's financial consultant at that time, presented results of a financial analysis on the project, which was a development program that contained 23 dwelling units and about 2,700 square foot of commercial and office development, as well as art-based space, makerspace office building. Kimmel's conclusions at the last meeting in April were that the project had about $750,000 worth of rebalancing of costs that needed to be done, as well as additional community benefit. So council directed staff and Kimmel to go back and negotiate with the applicant to come up with the rebalancing of costs, and that has been done at this point. And we've got the results of that, our Exhibit D in the draft resolution that you have in your packet, which is a color-coded summary sheet that you'll see. Bruce is here this evening, and he'll kind of present the deal points that are in that summary. It should be noted that to get to the rebalancing of costs, there's been some slight adjustments to the development program. And the revised development program is Exhibit A in your draft resolution. Basically, what has been done has been that there's been one additional unit included, so that you have a total development program of 24 units, as well as a restaurant has been included to take the place of the community building that was in the prior rendition of the application. And then each of the river townhomes has increased in size slightly. So before we go to Bruce, we'll have Robin kind of explain the revised development program and go over some items. It should be noted that we do have the draft resolution in your packet, and it would be to approve the sketch plan application with conditions. It requires the applicant to come back with a more detailed drawing set for final plan, as well as the code amendments necessary to make the program work. Exhibits C and D outline the framework of the deal that Bruce will be going over as part of his comments. So this evening, staff recommends hearing comments and a brief presentation from Robin Schiller from CCY, and then hearing a presentation from Bruce on the deal points and the rebalancing framework, and then taking some additional comments from Tim Belinsky and the applicant team, and then going into the public comment realm. So with that, we'd like to turn it over to Robin here to go. Oh, Tim, you got comments first? Yeah. Okay, go for it.
Here we go.
Can I just ask James something really quickly?
Sure.
Is it realistically that we've only got this on here for an hour?
Depending on the amount of public comment, it could be realistic.
Okay.
Sure.
But from the chunks that are coming, that are planned, okay.
Yeah, we believe so.
Okay, I will point out that the base conceptual plan is up on the wall. We wanted to have that as a consistent go-to for reference, and there's a couple other items there available for us. That does not include this stuff over here. And then Annie Glatz will be in the back if you see things popping up on the screen. That's her help over there. I've got some things to read here. We appreciate your time this evening and want to get you reacquainted with the work on the River Park Plan. Let me start by saying that our lead architect, Rich Carr, is currently hosting his daughter's high school graduation party tonight, and we kicked him off the team for this evening's meeting, ensuring that he is in the right place right now, which is probably at the bar, and certainly glowing at his daughter Livy's accomplishments for her high school work. Robin Schiller here is one of the firm's most sought-after architects, and I say that because I can speak personally on it. He and I worked thousands of hours together on Obermeyer Place in Aspen about 17 years ago. And I've wanted to work with him on another project ever since then. So I have a great faith in Robin. Here's where we are and how things stand right now. The original land use application was submitted to town just over 1 year ago. The project team has worked diligently with P&Z and town council fairly continuously during those months, and now with the town bringing in its financial consulting firm, Ehlers Public Finance, represented by Bruce Kimmel, who incidentally flew here from Minneapolis on Memorial Day yesterday so that he could be with us tonight in person. The plan has been reworked and rebalanced with the following enhancements. The project now includes a restaurant and patio of a significant size as an activator for the park, providing people food and drinks at the edge of the park. Early on, we agreed that a lively, family-friendly, and inviting beer garden, I think was the term, kind of place, would be fun and important to include in the program. We've worked to make this happen and appreciate the town's persistent encouragement to include a park restaurant, and that will extend the downtown vibrancy to this area and help to ensure the park is a fun setting and a place on the park that adds to the numerous reasons to linger at the park and enjoy this new area of town. The project will handle the oversight and the majority of the cost of the construction of Two Rivers Road, the street itself, and the sidewalk areas. This is a scope of work in public right-of-way that admittedly the development was not willing to undertake earlier but through the course of our dealings, we've gotten comfortable enough with it to take it on. The financial contribution to this work will help offset the current financial concerns raised through Basalt's Tabor limited property tax issue. Project will provide park restrooms on the area adjacent to the new restaurant building. The park will need these in order for people to feel welcomed and for people to extend their time there and for the future events and the programs to be successful. The community building, while sparked as an idea to provide a place for public gatherings and events, was saddled with too many burdens and concerns to be integrated into the mix. It's been replaced with the park restaurant, which includes a beer garden, I think I mentioned earlier, and which realistically would have been a real challenge for the town to oversee and successfully program. That's the community building. The parking for housing within the parking for housing within the project boundaries, meaning off-street parking, is very, very tight, since the project won't have an underground parking garage. We were able to find a couple spaces which helps accommodate the one added residence in the Maker office building, which is part of the rebalancing of the project. As a reminder, the project will provide a new RETA for the benefit of town and the art base. The project self-imposes a fee on the residential to ensure the park has additional funds from its neighborhood. The new neighborhood will bring in new property taxes, sales tax revenues, and building permit fees. Overall, the plan now includes 10 fewer residences than its original plan, while expanding commercial uses 90%, or over 10,000 square feet above the starting point. The addition of this much new commercial provided the ability to rework the uses adjacent to the park and push the residential away from the park, practically to the area where the park is not really a park-like space, but more a transitionary zone at the wetlands, as you see across the street, and those treed areas. While the commercial areas that occupy ground floor instead of residential allow a more comfortable interface between the people in the park and the people in those commercial nodes. Also, the integration of Art Base's new home and specific intention to include a visitor center remains in place as fundamentals for the neighborhood to come. The concern that somehow the new neighborhood's residences would interfere with the success of the park is highly overstated. And while we as a team have worked diligently to comfortably distance them, know that we have plenty of prior work experience with matching a buyer to a property that fits their needs and desires while also ensuring the operational needs of a multi-functioning neighborhood are successful. Recall that we need to sell these residences, and it will be our responsibility to match a buyer who wants to be part of the downtown core and active park setting with a home that fits that desire. To do otherwise would be a waste of time and would put our credibility at risk. We've done this before. Our hope is this. We said what we were going to do in this process, and you see now that we have done what we said we would do. We also hope that you appreciate that we've done the work on this together in numerous meetings together and through our dealings with the planning staff to bring the best ideas forward. We've literally around this table made conscious changes to evolve and improve the plan while balancing out all the necessary fundamentals to assure that it is doable. In the background, you'll see on the TVs just some reminder photos and images of what we've worked on through this process. They act as reminders of what we've been so excited to portray in our work, and we will continue to use these as we forge ahead with everybody's involvement. Robin will lead you through the conceptual site plan to ensure everyone is grounded, and then Bruce Kimmel will provide the overview of the roles and responsibilities for the public and private work that is to come. Looking ahead, the project will target a sale of the parkland to the town in the early part of next year, with groundbreaking on the project within 6 months after that. We're looking forward to seeing this project through, and especially looking forward to working through a community vision for the park and for the new neighborhood that will soon take shape. Robin?
Thank you very much, Council, for the chance to be here. I'm going to be very brief about this because I know that I know that, actually, I'm going to go this way because I'm going to look at that. Thank you all for the chance to present this. I'll be very brief because I know you're very familiar. Just want to touch on some of the reminder points. So the project that we're working on is about 100,000 square feet. It's part of the land from the Pan and Fork, which is above the floodplain. That's why it's buildable. It includes the portion along Two Rivers Road to the west portion of the Pan and Fork, going over adjacent to the RMI building. And as agreed by everybody, it does not include the eastern portion of that Two Rivers Road frontage, which will be preserved as open space, the V that's been discussed for the view corridor. Our project is intended to create a lively residential and mixed-use neighborhood. And with that in mind, we've clustered the residential use to the western portion here, where it fronts a part of the park. And then the more public uses are here to the eastern side, where they front the most active portion of the park and connect most readily to downtown. As Tim described, we have a mix here, residential units, 24 units in this area, and they're a mixture of different sizes and configurations of units, some free market, some affordable, some deed restricted. Some of them are multi-bedroom, some of them are small mini units. More of the residential units are clustered here in the center of the site on top of what we call the maker/office building. And this has commercial space on the ground level and part of the second floor with residential above it and parking tucked underneath. And as we come to the eastern side of the site, we come to the more community-oriented uses, the new building for the art base, which provides them a greatly expanded home, and the restaurant building here, which includes not only 3,000 square feet of enclosed space, but 1,500 square feet of an exterior terrace and patio. So that restaurant can really act to enliven the park, to extend the range of times and days and activities that will take place in that park and keep it really active. Circulation-wise, all vehicle access to the project is from Two Rivers Road here, but from a pedestrian or a bicycle standpoint, there are numerous ways to access it. Along Two Rivers Road, of course, but also coming along the edge of the parkland here by the restaurant area and along the south side, coming along the west side where there is an easement and a wide pedestrian corridor. And then there will also be pedestrian access between the restaurant and the art base building and between the art base building and the maker office building. And finally, there's also pedestrian access coming through the entrance to the Muse housing and all the way through the site. We talk about the porosity of the site, giving people many, many ways to move through here and connect from town to the park, so that our goal is that the buildings will not be a barrier. They will be a contribution to the town and the park, but not a barrier between them. Massing-wise, the largest masses of building here to the west, stepping down a little bit as you come to the office maker building. The art base building steps down even more in height, and the restaurant is a one-story building. So we don't have a great big building frontage on the park here. Finally, we've talked with a number of different parties who've been involved in the process. I want to particularly mention Sopris Engineers and Yancey Nickel, who've been working on the streetscape and the utility issues and the water issues here. Connect One Design, who I believe is working with the town on the park, and we've met with them. And particularly the fire district, we met with John and Beth, and they've been very good to work with, coming up with common sense solutions. We now have fire access through here between the art base and the maker building, and fire access down here into the Muse, as well as some agreements that Tim has made for the construction and equipage of the buildings. We'll have some features in there that allow them to fight fires within the buildings, to deal with the constricted space here that we want to create to get a sense of a tight community nature. And also the concerns about fires, which certainly we all have more today than we ever have before. So everybody we've worked with on this has been really cooperative, working toward common sense solutions. We look forward to creating a real extension of downtown Basalt to meet the river, but not to block it off. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Schiller.
Schiller, right?
Yes.
So now we'll move to Bruce Kimmel. Let me do the slide transition here.
Hello, Bruce. Thank you for coming back
Absolutely.
on your holiday.
It was pouring rain in Minnesota anyway, so.
As it is everywhere.
Right.
Every day.
Well, Mayor and council members, I'm Bruce Kimmel with Ellers. It's great to be back with you. I'd like to really quickly introduce my colleague Jim Mann from our Denver office. You might see Jim from time to time working with me on Basalt-related issues. I wanted to...
Could you just say in a word what you are and what you do?
Yes, thank you. I was about to, and I'm glad you reminded me.
Okay.
So we are an independent municipal advisory firm. We help towns and cities and counties with bond issues, but also with development-related analyses like this one, affordable housing, financial planning, utility rate studies, all sorts of things that might have a financial element to them. And we've been very fortunate to help Basalt over the last 5 years or so with a number of development-related projects like this one. I should also note that we only serve the public sector. So even though we work in collaboration with development teams to find mutually agreeable solutions, our fiduciary duty is always to the public entity like the town of Basalt. So, and I apologize, I've got a little bit of a cold. I might start resorting to pantomime or interpretive dance, but great. James, why don't we go to the next slide? So after the April 9th council meeting, you tasked us with figuring out how to achieve the rebalancing of town participations. As James mentioned, our analysis from April concluded that the project should have the capacity to take on about $750,000 of additional costs that were currently being proposed to be borne by the town. And you asked us to come back with some specific suggestions as to how to achieve that rebalancing in a way that was workable, of course, for the town as well as for the development team. We also knew that the development team might be making some modifications to its development program. James mentioned those. And we wanted to make sure we understood how that impacted their budget, their operating pro forma, and any of the other key financial metrics. And then we also really wanted to dig further into what were all the ways the town could participate, not only what was being proposed by the development team, but what were some alternatives as well that might have a better outcome or be more suitable for the town given your other competing priorities. So we looked at quite a few things in close concert with town staff in that regard. We also did some analysis of new revenues that would be happening, not just development-related revenues, building permit fees and so on, but future revenues like property taxes, sales taxes, park enhancement fees, and I'll get back into those more in a moment. So then our goal really was to use this analysis in phase 2, along with the guidance that we received from council on April 9th. A lot of you spoke about community benefit and vitality and really wanting to have more oomph there, if you will, in addition to what was being proposed at the time. To use all of those inputs and come back with a set of deal points for your consideration. And I'm really thrilled to tell you that I think we've achieved that objective. We've had a great partnership with Ellers, working with town staff, with Ryan and Christy and Susan and James, but also I have to give credit to the development team in really looking hard at their pro forma, what could they do to enhance their economic capacity, and also what were some of these ways that they could look to rebalance costs with the town so that you would feel more confident going forward with what was being asked of the town of Basalt. Let's move on to the next slide. So what I wanted to do for the next few slides, and I won't spend a ton of time here because Tim already covered a number of these points, is just make some compare and contrast to what was being proposed by the development team in April versus what's in the current set of deal points. And these deal points are all also in the, may I say, beautifully multicolored chart that I put together. Hopefully that was legible to you after we changed some of the background colors. But please stop me along the way if you have any questions about any of these specifics. So on the open space acquisition front, as you know, the original proposal was for the town to purchase approximately 54% of the CDC parcel for about $2 million. That included about a $300,000 premium on top of what would have been the strictly pro rata cost of $1.7 million. In the current set of deal points for the town's permanent long-term use, the plan is for the town to purchase 42% of the parcel for a strictly pro rata cost of $1.34 million. So that's down approximately $650,000. And I would point out that that's also about $250,000 less than the $1.6 million that's in your post-CIP budget. So right there, you have some post capacity freed up on the land acquisition front. As it relates to the art-based footprint acquisition, most recently, the developer's proposal was for the town to purchase that 5,000 square foot footprint for $160,000 and to resell it to art-based when it was ready to proceed, what we're calling phase 3 of the project. With the proposed agreement, the idea is still the same, but I want to stress that your staff has identified some RETA funds that you could use to purchase that footprint. And we all, after a lot of discussion and debate and consideration, feel it really is appropriate for the town to acquire that footprint, especially since you have eligible RETA funds, and thereby control the future use, suitable use of that portion of the site should the art-based project fail to materialize. So we think that that's a good outcome on that front.
Bruce, including
Yes.
the art base, is the town's purchase still only 42%?
It's about 47%.
Okay.
So very close to 50-50 if you include the art base portion. Moving on to the next slide. Two Rivers Road was a big point of concern for the town because basically most of the money you spend on that front would be general fund money, and as you all know, that is something that both you as council and town staff are paying close attention to, especially in this Tabor environment. Back in April, we were looking at total project costs, including some RAFTA bus stops, of about $1.1 million. And there was some murkiness. It's hard to get to exact apples to apples, but essentially the town was on the hook for about $900,000 of that, with the developer saying there was about $150,000 in their soft cost budget for parking improvements. We've really flipped that completely over in this development agreement. So now, looking at a total cost as estimated by Sopros Engineering of $844,000, BRP, the development group, is pledging to fund $600,000 of that cost, and the town will fund or work with partners or adjust the scope to address the remaining $244,000. We can get more into those details. There are some additional funding sources that we can put into play for the town's portion, but we really, in negotiation with the developers, changed that paradigm for Two Rivers Road almost completely. The community building, Tim alluded to the fact, or more than alluded to, noted that this is also a very significant change. Under the previous iteration, the polygon was going to be the town's responsibility. Any kind of a building there was going to be the town's responsibility. After hearing your comments on vitality and community benefit, they figured out a way to put that back on their side of the ledger, which is a huge reduction in future deliberations and potential investment on the town's part. And so I won't go into a whole lot more detail there, but I would also reiterate that BRP is funding $150,000 of costs for public restrooms that would be publicly owned, town-owned, but built adjacent to that restaurant. Moving on to the next slide. Parkland dedication is something that we talked about a little bit. With the original developer proposal, the idea was that the town would waive any parkland dedication requirement, including either land or fee in lieu. The idea here is that you would still be waiving any such requirement, but noting that when you really break down those Two River Roads project improvements, approximately $54,000 of that cost are for sidewalks not adjacent to the development. So it's adjacent to the park, it's on the north side of the street, and then the $150,000 of public restroom improvements, taking the combination of those, the developer is exceeding what would have been their parkland dedication requirement. Perimeter and public access costs were also an area of concern for us. There was a different fire lane proposal previously, as Mr. Schiller mentioned, and there was just some ambiguity as to how much of Tim's, the developer's site cost budget in the previous iteration was really going to be available for kind of those quasi-public private spaces. The town and the development team have done a lot of work to really clarify that and to simplify it and to make clear to both parties what their both capital and their ongoing operating expenses will be. So as your advisor, we feel much more confident and comfortable saying that you don't have some big looming unknown exposure as it relates to the interface or intersection of the public and the private spaces. Moving on to the next slide. Phasing. This is also a big area of improvement, I think, in terms of meeting the town's policy objectives. When we were here in April, there really were no definitive triggers or deadlines for when the development would build the 4 units of affordable housing, or specifically the office and makerspace components as well. And now we have 4 very definitive components in place for phasing. One is that the development group will fund and construct their required Two Rivers Road and public restroom components as part of their first phase of development. The second is that as soon as they've reached CO, or certificate of occupancy, on their 8th market unit, they have to be ready to pull the permit and get started on the part of Site Plan B, as it's called, which is the makerspace and the multifamily units that would include the affordable housing. I would also point out here that CO doesn't mean they've sold their 8th unit, it's just that they've completed it. So it's a pretty, I think, robust requirement of the development team that they be ready to go on the multifamily and the makerspace portion of phase 1 pretty quickly in the game. The third point is that upon reaching the CO for the 15th market residential unit, which would be 75% of all of the market units, which are 20 units altogether, as you can see. In addition to the 4 affordable units, BRP has 1 year then to pull the permit on phase 2, which is the restaurant and beer garden patio. And at the same time, the development group pledges to post a guarantee of $250,000 as additional earnest money, skin in the game, whatever you want to call it, to prove that they're working in earnest towards that phase 2, which is really something that I know many of you want to see as bridging the public and the private areas. So we feel like this was definitely an area of progress in nailing down how the developer was going to move from west to east in completing this development project. Moving on to the next slide. So in summary, when we concluded our phase 1 analysis back in April, again, we concluded that the development program for the developer had the capacity to fund another $750,000 of costs in basically taking away what was being proposed for town participation, and that we were going to look at how to rebalance those costs in negotiating deal points. So where we are today, we've really effectively rebalanced over $1 million of costs, $600,000 guaranteed for Two Rivers Road, $150,000 guaranteed for the public restrooms, plus no land sale premium. To be fair, if you counted the little bit that was in their soft cost before, it might be $900,000, but we've made huge strides in terms of rebalancing costs. In addition, I think it's worth noting that we've really limited exposure for both parties in terms of clarifying the public and private boundaries, the scope of the Two Rivers Road improvements, and the phasing of the development program. And finally, it's not on this slide, but I think it's also appropriate at whatever level of analysis you care to put it on it yourselves, that we are avoiding the potential obligation of the town to build a community building and really putting that onus on the developer, and the developer has the expertise to excel in that area. Moving on to the next slide, just really quickly, I can go into more detail on these if you'd like, but we did do some calculations then, being very conservative in terms of what kind of future taxes and fees would be generated on an ongoing basis. And these are for the town's benefits. So this is not including any prospective add-on PIF sales fee that the developer might choose to impose on the restaurant, but looking just at property taxes and sales taxes that the town would collect. And for general taxes, you can see we've estimated residential property taxes, the makerspace, the restaurant. Not a lot of money, but you can see it's roughly $15,000 to $25,000 over a 20-year period, assuming some pretty modest levels of inflation over time. The 2% general sales tax would generate between $30,000 and $60,000 a year, total of about $900,000 over a 20-year window. And in total, for general purposes, it's about $1.3 million of taxes, which again, I think is a pretty conservative estimate. We've tried to aim low in calculating that. Looking at the next slide then, in terms of what would be specifically available for parks and maintenance, improvements, et cetera, programming, you have your 1% post-sales tax on the restaurant and perhaps other retail taxable activity in the development, although it would be a small amount. And then this park enhancement fee is something that the developer proposed, that their market units, both the for sale and the rental units, not the affordable housing ones, but the rental market units, could pay on an annual basis to help fund public costs in maybe programming the park, maybe making park enhancements. And so it's a meaningful amount of money at about $55,000. And so in combination, you can see even without inflating that park enhancement fee, it's roughly $70,000 in total, up to about $90,000 over that 20-year window, for a total of $1.6 million. We know that you will have some additional costs, but you are anticipating bearing those anyways with your public space. And we don't think that adding the number of residents that are being proposed for these 24 units is really going to have a meaningful incremental cost for town operations. So all in all, we think we've rebalanced town participations very effectively. We feel good about the phasing that is in place, and pleased that if you see fit to move forward with this development program and instead of deal points, there's the prospect of some meaningful tax revenues available to the town as well. So that's all I have.
Okay, well.
I made it without choking.
Yeah, you
and
did
I would
really
welcome any
well.
questions from all of you.
Yeah. Council, questions for Bruce? Would you rather hear public comment first? I think everybody would rather. Okay, I think, can we save our questions for you until after public comment, because they may come up with some things as well. So if folks who have comments or questions would like to come up to the microphone, state your name, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. We are going to do that now.
Hello, Council. Royal Laybourne. Thanks for the opportunity. I just want to remind you all that there's been a long process that's gotten us to presentation of the sketch plan, and that the public is not getting what they want. The developer is getting what he wants out of this deal. And no matter how you massage it, in the April 9th meeting, we saw where there was the town's taxpayers who had entrusted the council and staff with our tax dollars. We've spent $7 million over there just on that parcel. Now the park is getting smaller, and the thing that everybody represented in all the processes that we've gone through is that we didn't want a bunch of high-end housing next to the park. End of story. It doesn't require a lot more than that. This is your job. This is public trust. If we've spent $7 million and we get $1 million in taxes over 20 years, big deal. We put out the money. We've carried the water. We're continuing to do it. This is supposed to be a community space, not a private space. We bought it. We paid for it. It's your job to act on this. Not to supplement the use of the most prime real estate that we have in this old town part of our community to support high-end development. It's not sustainable. It says right here that Basalt's inclusive. That's exclusive. And it's not sustainable. And it's based on my money, my dollars, my taxes. And I worked hard in many instances to support different candidates here that are on the council. And I don't see them doing their job if this gets passed, because it will create a conflict in the use of the park. The size of the park has gotten smaller, and all the flowery words about community development, it's not community development. It's development. It's residential development in a public space. Everybody wanted vitality in downtown Basalt. We get one restaurant? Hello? For how much money are we paying to get one restaurant? Really, I ask you. Let's cut through the crap here. Let's go back to years and years of meetings. Excuse my language. But the reality is that nobody supported a bunch of residential down here. And we're all intelligent, hardworking, community-oriented people. We want a park. Thank you very much. Deny this application.
Thanks, Roy. Others?
Thank you. I'm Frank Taverna
Hi, Frank.
with Basalt Silver Partnership since 1983. My partner and I have owned a 23,000 square foot commercial property in downtown Basalt. The Jimbo's Liquor building, which includes the former Clark's Market. We owned the property when it was occupied by City Market. We'd like to express our support for the Basalt River Park development on the former Pan and Fork property. We believe this project will initiate a revitalization of downtown Basalt. This project will bring a vitality to downtown Basalt that will energize the entire area. It will bring new people to downtown and also includes the art-based facilities to strengthen the community values, along with new office spaces that will house new employees in the downtown core. We believe this project will help start the healing process for the polarization the Pan and Fork property has created. It could be the genesis for the realization of a river park in downtown Basalt, finally. It would continue the rebirth that was started with the Rocky Mountain Institute Innovation Center and the Roaring Fork Conservancy offices. We hope it will lead the way to other quality and measured opportunities in downtown Basalt, and that it will help fulfill the tenets of the Our Town project, in which so many citizens participated in and shared their ideas on what they envisioned for downtown Basalt. Thank you for your hard work on assessing the merits of the Basalt River Park development.
Thank you, Frank.
Well, I'm back. I'm Lynn Mace. I own the Toklat Gallery on Two Rivers Road. I've been in Basalt since 2005, and I was just calculating tonight that I was around when Bill Kane brought to bear the purchase of Pan and Fork in conjunction with the CDC, the town and CDC. So if I'm not mistaken, this proposal is for the parcel owned by CDC. It is not public land, it is privately owned land. Anyway, I am so for this, and I'm so tired of saying I'm so for this. You know, it's probably not the sexiest plan or the most wonderful plan. I was hoping for community building for events and things like that, but hey, it's a beautiful park, half development. It needs to be done. I walked in with Frank and I said, oh, please, please, will you vote for this? Because we just got to get this done. It's just eating away at everything. And just to end on a sort of sour note, will the two of you please get together and fix the black flapping fence? Thank you.
Lynn. Hey, Murph.
Hey, how you doing? My name's Mike Mercatores. I know a lot of you from, I do restaurants. And I currently consult on restaurants. And I've been working with the team, looking at this community space, this community building. and I'm really excited about the opportunity to be able to help you guys and work with you guys to make sure this is a space that is going to fit the needs of the community and what you guys are looking for. And also on the restaurant owner side, be able to scale up and scale down and be designed efficiently, because we know that Basalt's very seasonal. I've had restaurants here. You know, it's hard to fight that seasonality, so you need to design that in from the beginning. So overall, I think having some more bodies in downtown, a reason for people to come downtown, and having something on this park that is going to be able to function as a community amenity, I'm all for it. So, thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, sir. Jerry.
Excuse me. Jerry Twilliger, Homestead Drive. Like Lynn, I'm surprised this process has gone on. It should have been squelched a long time ago. What you're looking at is high-end development on a place where very low-end people were removed to start with. Also, less than 7% of the people polled on this park said they wanted residential. Those are the citizens of the town. It is really time for this town council to represent the citizens, not the developers. It's time to reject this plan, step back, and do something a whole lot better. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Nobody else, really? Bernie?
Hello, Bernie Grauer. I'm very pleased to be here tonight. I see what seems to be a workable, realistic compromise of the somewhat conflicting goals of the town, which is to have more park and some activated public-private development on that land. I'll just refresh the memory for everybody in attendance that in terms of a poll of 77% of the people said they wanted it to be all park. When it came to putting their money on the line, they were not ready to make that decision. The council that I was part of presented that to them as a ballot item, the town buying the land and developing half of it and keeping half of it as park funded with public funds. That lost. What we have here tonight, I believe, is the sweet spot. This hits the sweet spot in many ways. Number one, desire for more park than was originally envisaged when this proposal was put forth. This gives us almost an additional acre of park and retains the revered V view from the town to the river, and is at the crucial junction of Midland and Two Rivers Road. This park gives us public vitality in the commercial and makerspace and the potential for the art base to activate its own space and for the commercial group, the Chamber of Commerce, to have a new and attractive space. This is the sweet spot in terms of a restaurant and a large public plaza where refreshments can be served. That was always one of the strongest desires of when I talked to people, when I saw polls, and this achieves that. And I just think that is a good representative of how this far this project has come by the council and the developer and Tim working together cooperatively. As you remember, he at first was saying, I don't know if I can put anything that is commercially viable larger than a coffee kiosk on it. And that clearly would not have met the needs and the desires of the town. And here we have a commitment for a large restaurant and a large plaza space, and these are risky financial investments. The developer is taking a risk. The other sweet spot is that the size, scale, and mass is not inappropriate and overwhelming. It is appropriate for the space and the town, and this project has received the Planning Commission approval. And one of the final small but important bits is we will have very attractive public restrooms available to activate and serve the use of the park. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernie. Others? Hello, Mr. Grant.
Hello, Dan Grant, Homestead. I wasn't going to speak because, yeah, anyway. I just want to remind some of you old-time residents that quite a few years back we voted on buying the trailer park. And this was when it was kind of in the deal that we would sell the Levinson property first before we bought it. So this is back many years ago. And yet, in the dead of night, Bill Kane and the council, or whoever decided to buy half of it, and we still haven't basically sold the Levinson property. And we sold part of it to Rocky Mountain Institute and gave away part of it to them because they needed more property for the same amount of money. I think the Water Conservancy Board paid us for it and then ran into building finance problems. And so we basically put a lease on them, I guess. So what I'm saying is this project shouldn't even be considered because based on the vote of the people before all these other longtime residents here voted, they didn't want to do it until we could buy the whole thing. And that's my second thing is why we didn't buy the whole thing, I don't know. Is maybe because money. The other thing I just want to speak on, I just don't like the project at all, and not because it isn't a good project in the sense of what they've tried to do here, but the restaurant and the alcohol thing with the making it more fun. There's not enough alcohol in the world to make it more fun for me in there. Of course, you got to remember I don't drink, so. The Two Rivers Road is becoming more and more constricted. I just don't like what you people are doing with that road. And what I'm talking about, it's getting so narrow and it's got the little wobble in it. And so when you go down there, I've seen one person hit another person's vehicle down there where they had their parking there, their bike rack stuck out so far that he whacked the bike rack. Now when you go down there with your vehicle and if the bicycler decides to stay in the road rather than on the 10-foot wide sidewalk we got there, then we got a problem because it's really narrow. You got vehicles sticking out there, we got a problem. In the winter, hopefully bicyclists won't be there as much. But I tell you what, in front of the Rocky Mountain Institute, they plow the snow into the parking spaces. That means those real short parking spaces, now they're backed out further into the road. So I hope you will, hopefully if this goes about, whatever you guys decide to do, that the parking will be looked at really closely and try not to narrow it down anymore. 10-foot, whatever they are, I think they're 10-foot wide sidewalks, they're way too wide. They're taking too much room where there should be more road. I feel more comfortable in my old age of missing a bicyclist there going down that narrow stretch if I had a little more room. Because you know, you got to give them 3 feet and they wobble, I wobble, somebody's going to get hurt in that narrow section. So anyway, as far as I'm concerned, no, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Grant. Others?
Hi, I'm Sandy Kuharchak. I live over in Twin Rivers condo. And I'm relatively new here. I've been here 6 years, and for probably most people here, they've been here for a long time. For a long time. And in fact, when we first moved here, the trailers were still there, but they were talking about getting rid of them. So we're thinking, oh, a couple of years, something will happen, you know? And we're as frustrated as everybody else. But I think what I hear over these last 6 years is looking back. We have a lot of people looking back, and that's not a bad thing, but we're here now. And I'd really like to see the project go forward. I think they've made a lot of compromises. I love the restaurant. I like the housing over commercial. I think that's a really good compromise. The art base right there, it's great. I mean, we talk about vitality. If that's what we want, then this is what we want. I mean, like I said, I think there's been a lot of give and take on both sides. Nothing's going to be perfect, but this is, like I said, I'm I'm happy with it. They've really cut down how much residential there is from the first plan we saw. And the park's there. And I guess that's the music stand, is that, or the little, on the corner?
There, bandstand.
But it may not be there.
But that's a maybe.
It'd be in a different spot.
Yeah.
I'll throw that in too, that might help. But anyway, I'm in favor of it. I know it's very contentious, but we all have opinions, and I hope everybody respects everybody else's. And thank you, council.
Thanks, Sandy. Any more? Okay, going. We're going to close the public hearing at 7:30 and hear comments from council.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys could make room at the table for James to come up.
Oh, for sure. James, you're invited to the big table.
It's a big move. Sorry.
Okay, council members, what do you got on?
You calling on me?
I'm trying.
All right.
You'll be called on.
So, one comment on the comments is that there wasn't anyone who I didn't partly agree with. And this council, I can guarantee, has heard you. We've been working on this for all of our tenure in this last 4 years. And, this is a compromise. And it really is that, if I look at it, I wish there were 100% replacement housing for the trailers that were gone. That's not there. I wish there were less free market. Didn't get that. I wish there were less park, frankly. I think we got a lot of park. But the reality is we have compromised to allow the free market housing to give us some good things for the community that I think will ultimately be great. Are they as good as what I think should be there? No. Well, I'm compromising because this is politics. And it's a community. And part of that is this was a good collaboration. I mean, when we first saw this project, I remember saying, this is a bad project. And it has come a long way. And Tim and Bruce, there was substantial work in there that was really made this a better, frankly, a better deal for the town. And I know that's difficult. So I thank you for that collaboration. I think we have to move on past this now. The people who want a lot of park are going to get a lot of beautiful park. The people who want activation are going to get substantial, commercial restaurant makerspace and smaller units and some deed-restricted units. I think when we move past this, when we approve this and move on, I think it'll empower others in the town to do things that we want to see. The Clark's parcel, other areas, redevelopment, and possibly more affordable housing in the core. So, look, it's not perfect. I understand. I heard you, but I think we should support it.
Thanks, on. Bill?
I can agree with all that Auden said, and as a kind of a resident who pays residential property taxes, and as a business owner who pays commercial taxes, I appreciate that this does integrate both. Going through some of the points, Bruce, I think that probably some of the estimates on the commercial property tax that will be paid are probably understated. We might see more based upon the square footages that you've estimated and knowing what I pay for the 1,000 square feet that I have. I think you're significantly understating what the town might realize. But I guess I want to thank all of the town for sharing their views. And as Auden said, we do hear you, but we have to represent all of the town, not just one group or one set of interests. And so I think we're giving it our best shot, and hopefully we are. remaining faithful to the reasons why you elected us. And that does represent compromise. I am very enthusiastic for the makerspace. I think the notion that this faces towards the art base is a fantastic development that will invigorate the arts foundations of our town, which, by the way, are one of the key targets that we've identified within our economic growth strategy. So this plan does address our growth strategy. It does address our strategic framework, and I want to thank you for honoring that, because the strategic framework also reflects what the town told us they want. So I actually think we're doing a pretty good job of addressing what the town told us they want in aggregate. As a point, James, in the notes, we still have reference to the Basalt Chamber. I didn't see that anywhere in here. I take it the Basalt Chamber is not going to be locating on the parcel, but that wasn't too clear.
May I address that?
Uh-huh.
The dealings with the chamber continue. We do have an area that's called out as nonprofit space, and we'll be reaching out to them and continue to make it be known that we'd like to include their visitor center. Primarily, it seems to be the interest as compared to the visitor center and office space into this area. We've also worked out a commitment from the town to remain available for the Marina Park area, to be available for oversized parking and trailer and rigs. So it's still there, Bill.
Okay. Wasn't clear. I think it's good. But the fact,
careful about it.
The fact that you've preserved space for NGOs also, I think, executes on the original vision of making this a campus for big thinking NGOs, which I think gets to your point, Mr. Taverna. If that's what we want to have, if we want to attract knowledge-based institutions, this might make that possible. So I would hope that we will see outreach to prospective candidates, including POW, CORE, AGCI, and others, that might be interested to occupy some of this office space. But I guess the final point that I'd make, the notion of the town buying the little sliver for the art space is kind of news, but it's good news, frankly, because again, it evidences our support for the arts, and I think by virtue of approving the sketch plan, it will also help them in their fundraising efforts to finance the construction of an art space that we can all be proud of. So again, thank you, and thank the town for all of your contributions.
Thanks, Bill. Garrett?
Sure. You know, I've been thinking about this project property for a long time. It's kind of weird now that I can say that I've been in the town of Basalt for 17 years, and you know, I'm actually, you know, still not the longest serving or the longest people who've lived here, like the Grants, who have been here for a lot longer, but I've watched how we've tried to purchase this property once. It failed. That was a long time ago when we did it in, I think, 2008, and we tried to purchase this property and do replacement housing, and it failed. Then it was through, you know, the bond, we were able to purchase part of it, and yeah, that's not a pretty process. And that whole talk about, you know, what we've spent on this to date and everything else was not a pretty process. But it got us to a planning process to try to figure out what to do with this property. And, you know, I've been on council for part of it, and listening to the public, you know, at first, when the first development came, it was way too large for the public to handle it. And we were told by a survey and told by, you know, the citizens that that was not going to work. So what we try to do is buy it a second time, and that failed. And so in the end, when we were working on council about what to do with this property, you know, I've been pretty consistent that I said, you know, try to get some compatible development and at least half of it to be park and to be open to the public. And in the end, I always was not very happy about residential on this property. And, you know, I really thought there would be a knight in shining armor that would come and save the town and buy this property and provide everything everybody wanted. And magically, that didn't happen. The town citizens didn't vote for it, and the knight in shining armor never showed up. So, in the end, the town council said no to the last development. We didn't really even have to say no because it was in a quasi-strange process that I'm so happy we didn't do this time. But last time, it was such a strange process that I think they got the hint that that wasn't going to work at 150,000 square feet. Now, this is right around where, in the end, I felt to compromise. And, my compromise is not about necessarily, trying to give something to everyone. My compromise is about moving forward with a project, moving forward with something that, that has a lot of community elements in it. And really, truly getting the park piece started. And I'm very happy that my main thing was going to be to make sure that the park thing is phase 1. We own it, we can do what we want with it, and truly the financing now of it is a lot more feasible to me. It makes a lot more sense. And, to me, we have simplified what the town's going to own, what the town's responsible for, and what the developer's responsible for. And I know there's still people out there that go back to the survey that said no residential. But that survey was done 4 years ago. And 4 years ago, things were different. And things are out of today, and I talk to people who actually, now live here and talk about this property. And one of my friend's little daughter came to me and said, that fence has been up since I've been in 2nd grade. She's now in 5th grade. And so that's a long time to just watch nothing happen. I've seen other proposals come, potentially, but they're not that much different than this. And it's just a little potentially less free market, higher end residential, but there was still residential being put on this. So I feel I'm at a point where I feel enough support from the community that we can move forward with this if, one of the things I want to make sure that gets clarified before it goes to the final review is, I want to clarify a little more about the art-based space being functional. I think we saw that it still needs to be worked out. That, to me, that has to be worked out before final, because that to me is, I'm concerned. I think Gemma's here, and I really love the art base, and I really think it's great that we can move them to a better spot, because, the town could potentially do something completely different with this whole area here. And the town can really reinvigorate this area if, something the community loves, the art base, has a new home. However, I've seen the struggles the Roaring Fork Conservancy went through to finally get their approval and their building built, and I just worry in the same base, the art base. So that space, to me, will have to be functional and have to be kind of planned so we can see what it would be like in relations to the park before the art base get there. And I know the town's going to control it, but I think we need to work together to make sure that's a functional spot, as we're building out other pieces. And so, that's where I'd be on that one. And then, something I want to talk about a little bit more. I don't necessarily need it now, but before second reading, this is second reading?
This is a sketch plan.
Oh, this is sketch plan, but before the final plan comes through, is explain more about the park enhancement fees and really, understand how this development can enhance the park through funding, not just through, the fact that we're going to tell the residents of this new place, you can't complain about our noise, you can't complain about all these things, is I want to know about how the enhancement fees really work. And so, You know, that's one thing I'd like to see. And, you know, I'm hoping this leads to just some finality with this. I think the saddest part is where we're at, is a lot of people are exhausted about this process. I talked to a lot of people and they're not showing up tonight, and they don't, and the sad part is they said, you know, just get her done. And I'm like, what do you mean get her done? And they're like, get it done, finish this so we can have a great park and we can have some development on that park. You know, I think the first part of this being all residential was something that I could never support. The commercial piece, I talked to some of the potential people, you know, that potentially could be in here. And this could be really cool because they're all public spaces. All of the openings are public. There's no private. There's no like, they can close it at dusk and dawn and all that stuff. These are public spaces. So, you know, when I look at that, those are the public spaces. They're not necessarily green grass park, but they are urban park. And to me, when I add all those up, I'd like to see the final number as when you come into the final, but when I add it up, we basically are at almost 50-50. And so that's where I was at originally. And so I'm going to stop talking now and
I
give
don't
it to
think you
somebody else.
can. Ryan? Thanks, Gary.
I just had a question on your timeline. I'm allowed to ask questions, right? What would be the timeline be between phase A, phase B? I think the restaurant's the final thing you're gonna do.
I think it's a good question. The likelihood is that early next year we'll be able to convey and pull off the transaction for the land to be acquired by the town and acquisition by the Roaring River Park group of the CDC parcel from the group represented there behind my back. And I think it'll be 6 months of further work to go to building permit. And then I think those first round of units on the west side, Ryan, will probably take 9 months, maybe 12 months to build. So it's that kind of progression. Everything that's in these phases is probably a 1-year build.
So it's about 3 years till we get to the restaurant?
I think so.
Ew.
You know, it's also interesting because it's not such a large project. It's about the size, I've mentioned this before, of one block, the equivalent of one block at Willits, to get a sense of scale. It could be done in one shot financially, and if the economy was there and everything was all organized. It's a fairly complex project because of all the mix of uses, though. But if we could do it in one shot, we will. There's not an intention to string it out. Nor is it so big that it has to be phased. It's not so overwhelmingly large that it would have to be phased, but we protected the project by phasing it.
Well, as everyone in the town, I've followed this process. One of the reasons I ran, because I wanted to see something happen. I think Auden and Bill echoed it very well of, this is a compromise. Some of us wanted all parks, some of us wanted bigger development. This is kind of in the middle. This has been a long process, and I appreciate everyone in the town input here or on the street or in comments online. Everything is appreciated. I think you can look at what they've done. They've dropped it from 81% residential down to 61%. I understand some people are still against residential there. Most development requires residential to pay for itself. I don't like that, but that's kind of just the way it is. But I think we are getting a lot of public amenities. For the people that want the whole park, we're getting half a park. So I kind of agree with everyone else's sentiment up here, and I want to start looking forward and not back.
Thanks, Ryan. It has been a long time, hasn't it? It's been super emotional because at the beginning and many years into this process, we all had a vision. Unfortunately, we all had a separate vision. I think Auden did nail it and Bernie nailed it, that the vision was something that we hung on to, but for me, my particular vision and the people who shared that, it was about us owning that parcel, and so that we could do the things that those surveys ask us to do. As soon as we got a no vote on that, we could no longer say the public's going to control the destiny of that. We are going to have to come up with something that we can live with, and we came up with several somethings that we could not live with. And I feel like, as much as it feels like there's been some building crawl onto what I always hoped would at least be half of the park, I feel like the buildings that have crawled into what I was hoping would be public open space is going to be areas that are accessible to the public. And that wasn't something that we necessarily saw in earlier renditions. It was closed. It was private hotels and private everything. And we have gained a lot in that. And I have to agree, Gary said it very well, that people have remained divided on this issue for so long that it can't go on any longer. And this will be good. It will be good for us to make a decision. It will be good for us to have access to that park and for the flapping black fence to go away and for us to see kids out there playing and maybe an ice rink out there for like the winter activities like Merck was referring to. You've got to have a year-round draw out there. And I know that there are people out there who are my dear friends who are mad at me, mad as hell from time to time, but everyone who sits up here has that problem or else they're not doing their job. You have that problem from time to time. So, I'm finished. Does anybody have a motion?
And just to note that James handed out a revised resolution here with some corrections to it.
Yeah, there are a couple minor corrections in there in terms of the commercial square footage. There was a mis typo, basically. There's an additional representation in there to tie it generally to the conceptual height diagram that's been provided to council in the past. Those were basically the two most significant.
But the motion remains the same?
Yes, motion is to approve based on the revised reso that you have.
Did you want to mention?
The only other thing changed was the RITA.
The RITA.
It's not to the art base, it's to an arts organization that the town chooses, correct?
Yeah, and that came from a comment from Councilor Riffle. She was concerned about tying it down, and it was a good point. Staff thought to tie it to an organization that the town approves.
Great. Motion?
Mayor, I move that town council approve resolution number 23, series of 2019.
As amended.
As amended.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And,
I would just like to request, Bruce, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to see your backup, all the calculations that you had done, just because I think they're material and they're awfully well thought out. I'm also interested in the RITA.
Yeah.
Just for future.
okay.
I'd love to
I think we'll
discuss that
hear
as well.
more on the next round. 5-minute break.
Thank you, council.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Bruce. I don't think it's.
Hi, Steve. Good to see you.
Doing pretty well on time, I think. Our next item is continued public hearing and first reading on ordinance 10. Aspen Ski Ski Co. application for the purpose of considering an application submitted by Aspen Ski Co. on behalf of the property owner, Willits Town Center, LLC, for amendments to the Willits Town Center PUD to permit the Aspen Ski Co. Willits Workforce Housing Project on Block 9 of Willits. James, would you
Thank
like
you.
to?
Yeah, this evening we have Philip Jeffries and Dave Corbin here from the Aspen Skiing Company. This is a continued public hearing and a first reading of an ordinance regarding an application by the Aspen Skiing Company to construct a residential building on Block 9 of Willits Town Center. At the last meeting, staff went over the requests for the PUD that were in the staff memo, as well as discussion items, and the applicant presented the project to council, and council also took and considered public comments and provided initial council comments on the application. Council's comments were varied in terms of the parking program that was proposed, as well as the concept to have the 6-bedroom units that was proposed in the original application. And as a result, the applicants have come back with 2 development alternatives for consideration by the council. Alternative number 1, which was in your packet, and we also have it up on the board here, is basically the development program that the council saw at the last meeting. It has the 8 deed-restricted units on the first floor in place of the commercial that's required by the PUD on Robinson Street. It has a significant amount of 6-bedroom units on the upper floors, as was presented by the applicant. And they proposed to park the project having 34 parking spaces in the surface parking lot on the back of the building, as well as to use 33 of the on-street parking spaces on Pioneer Street, in the Pioneer Street right-of-way. It is slightly different, this alternative number 1, from the proposal that you saw last time, in that at the last meeting, the applicant was proposing to have a lease on these parking spaces. The applicant would like to actually propose in this alternative 1 to purchase the parking spaces in Pioneer Street for $202,000, and then the town could use that money to create either more parking or do a parking management program is the idea.
James, can you just clarify the Pioneer Street is the street, there's no such thing as Pioneer Street now.
There's no such thing as Pioneer Street now. There's a Pioneer Street right-of-way. This is Robinson Street. The building would front onto Robinson. This is the Pioneer Street right-of-way now. You'll see there's a difference in grading right now where Pioneer Street would be, but there is no actual street. And this is Market Street running to the south of the project.
And they're not proposing anything on Robinson Street?
Nothing on Robinson, no. And then there's a new alternative 2 that I was referencing that the applicant has come up with. We've got it in your packet. The alternative 2 would basically reduce the number of affordable housing units from the 8 to the 2 that are required in the PUD and go back to a commercial component on the Robinson Street frontage. It would also add a parking garage under the building component of the lot, as you can see here on the floor plan, so that they would have a total of 77 off-street parking spaces to meet the parking requirements in the PUD. This alternative 2 would also go to a 4-bedroom unit component from the 6-bedroom units that were previously included in the alternative 1. It reduces the number of PUD amendment requests. It reduces it down to having 4 unrelated people in a unit at the most, and having 4 stories within the current 45-foot height limit that's in the PUD. Staff has included 2 draft ordinances for the council to consider in your packet, one representing each of the development alternatives that SKICO has put out there. The ordinance for the alternative number 1 is essentially the ordinance that council considered at the last meeting, with a revision to represent the applicant's revised proposal on the 33 on-street parking spaces from the town, which includes that they would buy those parking spaces. ordinance for alternative 2 that is in the packet is similar to the ordinance to alternative 1, but it changes the affordable housing units from 8 to 2 units, and it represents that the applicant will meet the parking on site. It does not contain the parking mitigation of having the free bus passes for the tenants or the car share cars that were proposed as part of the alternative 1 scenario, since they're proposing to meet the parking requirements with that alternative 2. And it also represents only having the 4 unrelated people change instead of the 6 that's in alternative 1. Both ordinances would require the applicants to come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the design review of the building itself. In reviewing the 2 different alternatives and considering those, staff feels that alternative number 2 is more in keeping with the current character of the PUD and the concept of the PUD with the residential parking happening off-street and on the site. And having a presence of commercial on the first floor, which is similar to the rest of the PUD at this point. The downside to alternative number 2 is that you would get a reduction in the reduction in the affordable housing units. You'd have 6 less of those as part of the project. This evening, staff would suggest taking some comments from the applicant because they have a presentation for you. Taking public comments as it is a continued public hearing, and providing council discussion on the 2 alternatives that you have in front of you. So we're going to hook up the applicant's computer here.
Okay. First hurdle. Good evening.
David Corbin, Aspen Skiing Company, obviously with Philip Jeffries. Following last council meeting, Philip and I went back to the office and tried to really figure out what we'd heard. There were obviously a great number of comments made by council touching on a variety of subjects. As we tried to distill them and understand them and sort of put them into a workable list to which we might respond, we came up with the following. Seemed as though council was concerned about commercial viability or commercial vitality. Obviously, the deletion of commercial at the street level is a big thing. That we heard from council. We also heard concerns, James just alluded to them, about community character and whether the nature and form of these buildings, how they're parked, the ground floor commercial, residential above, still fit that community character and the PUD's purpose, if you will, from a design standpoint, as we had proposed our building. Subset of that was concern about the 6-bedroom apartments or 6-bedroom suites with a couple of living areas and shared kitchen and dining. Obviously, one or more council members questioned whether that was realistic or was too dense. We also heard, lastly, if we were to take all these together, concern remaining about parking, both the sufficiency of parking and sort of the form that parking might take, whether it was surface or whether it was subgrade. 3 council members in particular expressed the opinion that we should go ahead and put subgrade parking under this building and not try to park it on the surface. 2 other council members seemed less concerned with the subgrade character of the parking and expressed the opinion that they wanted more than anything, if possible, to constrain the number of cars, foster transit, and manage the parking somehow. For us, we still see that parking issue as perhaps the most challenging one and the one that is most impactful on the viability of these projects to carry out. financially and physically. We still see that concern being less one of sufficiency and number of stalls, and more one as to management and enforcement of the parking that's in place in Willits today. How did we respond then? We went back, took a look at the project as had been presented to council before, and thought, well, can we meet those? If we just literally go down that list, what would that mean? What would it look like? How might we propose or suggest or even examine the alternatives? Which I think James has described very, very thoroughly and completely. I thank him for that summary. But first, we looked at that project as presented before at the last meeting, essentially a variation on the project as first presented to the P&Z, where we'd gone to 4 stories, albeit shrinking the total height of the building, nesting the secondary bedrooms, if you will, in a separate floor rather than treating them as lofts as we did in the first drawing of this project. We took a look at all of those and said, oh, we really still think that meets our need. It's financially feasible for us in all likelihood. It's something that we can build, and it meets the program needs as we've seen it for affordable housing, while providing the public benefit of the street grade housing accessible to daycare teachers and providers. So we still came away sort of very drawn to that alternative, with the caveat that quite clearly that didn't solve the parking problem. So hence the proposal among the 3 options that had previously been suggested or proposed by staff as we'd come out of P&Z. We'd commit to the purchase of surface parking, $202,000, I think, or whatever it was, and commit to that purchase so that we could, in fact, guarantee that there would be the 77 spaces that the project's program would call for. So that was our first response in Alternative 1. The second response in Alternative 2 was to try to address all of the subcomponents of those issues I just described. Hence, the effort to excavate, go under structure, put parking subgrade, retain the commercial space, not change that element or that part of Willits' character. Unfortunately, as a consequence, deleting most of the deed-restricted units that would be available to daycare providers and others, and reconfiguring the apartments strictly into a combination of 4s and 2s, rather than having any 6-bedroom apartments and dual suites. That also, unfortunately, resulted in the elimination or reduction of a lot of the transit subsidies that had been proposed and suggested and which we thought were important to focus on before. Well, we went through that exercise and then put it into the process late last week with the town, getting it into the packet for this week's meeting. We were simultaneously pricing those exercises and the alternatives with our contractor. And got our pricing Thursday night, and we're a little shocked, but saw that our pricing in response to the changes that we'd made since we came through P&Z, again, nesting the secondary bedrooms, removing the lofts, going to the 4 stories, adding the elevators, all of those kinds of things, we found our cost had risen by 17%. From our estimates in December to try to present that project as we showed you last time. And the Alternative 2, we got conceptual pricing on. First pricing was really tight by divisions, line item by line item. Second, we don't have as fully developed plans. We're a little behind on that just in terms of detail, but got conceptual pricing, and we were informed that that pricing was about 32% higher than what we'd been looking at in December. For us, with costs climbing that dramatically, for us that really jeopardizes the feasibility of the projects and looking at the alternatives. And our conclusion that we've been wrestling with really since Friday, and again at great length today, is that it largely puts the second alternative out of reach for us. It no longer becomes affordable housing. We can't bring that building in well and still retain rents in the $500 to $600 a month range as we'd hoped. It just is really becoming expensive. So what we wanted to take the opportunity tonight is focus more intently on alternative one and go through that in some greater detail, try to address and speak to some of those explicit comments that you'd had last time, and have a dialogue or discourse with respect to that alternative. With that, I turn it to Philip to go through the detail.
Perfect. I know that sounded a little dire, but I'm really excited about alternative one. And I wanted to kind of go through some of the things. We had a meeting last time, and it was a little bit rushed on a couple points. So we'll go back to that and open it up. Some of the things that make me so excited about alternative one is obviously in its form. We looked at the form last time, but it's a smaller building than anything out in Willits. It's 36 units instead of the PUD approved 93. It's shorter than its neighbors. It's smaller than what's approved out there today. There's been a lot of talk about impacts today in the valley. This building has fewer impacts. It also fills a gap, a critical gap in Basalt's housing. We talked last time about the one-bedroom affordable housing unit in Willits deed restricted building as requiring $70,000 a year to afford. That's a huge number, and that's the starting point in Basalt's housing right now. $70K for a one-bedroom. There's a hole there. Our building addresses that hole. I've also heard on many meetings that this project is flawed, and you guys just came from a meeting or just discussed a project that has had many iterations, and you've discussed the alternatives. What are the alternatives on this site? The alternatives on this site are actually pretty well defined. The PUD speaks very clearly about what's possible on this site. And we know that the alternative is more impact. Today in Eagle, they were discussing the tree farm. There were a lot of folks in this room that said that the tree farm impacts were too much. There was too much commercial. There was not enough affordable housing. There was too much impact on traffic. It doesn't contribute to the solving problems. It adds to, it contributes to problems, not solutions. I think we can all agree that the alternative is much more aligned with that versus what we're proposing tonight, which actually does make progress towards our goals. I think most people would agree that this checks a lot of boxes for Basalt. It's 8 units and 12 beds of deed-restricted housing for our teachers, our daycare professionals. That's a big number. It turns commercial vacancy into commercial demand, which we've heard from our businesses as a huge problem. It incentivizes transit use. And it creates beds for Basalt's largest employer. That's us. We also heard clearly from you, as David mentioned, that parking really is the biggest single concern here. And so I did want to spend a few minutes talking about that. But I wanted to start by saying the main reason parking has become such a clear concern in our public hearings is that parking is already a problem at Willits. And it will be a problem at Willits regardless of if our project exists or is successful or not. And what is the problem at Willits? The problem is easily understood by shopkeepers arriving at their stores in the morning to find all the spots in front of their stores taken. What's happening at Willits? What's going on? Why is it? Willits was designed so that the on-street parking is for the commercial uses and for Takah. So why are there so many cars on the street when businesses aren't even open? Well, that's because of the enforcement strategy chosen by Basalt at the moment. So Basalt is enforcing a 72-hour maximum out there, And that, I think, we've talked to staff, we think that made perfect sense as Willits was being built up. But that time is past. Our parking consultant, who happens to be your parking consultant, has made it very clear that he thinks that aligning the management strategy of the parking at Willits with the PUD regulations would solve the parking problem at Willits. He doesn't think there's a parking shortage at Willits. He thinks there's a parking management problem at Willits. So, back to a little more on parking here. As you all know, since many of you were involved with Willits from the beginning, the commercial floor area that was approved at Willits was in direct proportion to the number of spaces that was on the street. Commercial floor area is tied to on-street parking. Our site, of course, has commercial floor area embedded in it. It has 45 spaces allocated to it. By no surprise, those spaces happen to surround our block. Just for orientation, Robinson Street, 18 spaces on the frontage there, 11 here, and 16 on Pioneer. Those spaces are tied to the commercial that is required on this block. Okay, well, we discussed earlier that we think that our proposal is proposing to remove the commercial. So what happens? Are we going to convert those parking spaces? Since we're removing the commercial, that's gone. Are we going to convert that to park? Or what are we going to do with those spaces? Well, believe it or not, we actually did convert a bunch of parking spaces to park already in Willits. We did that in 2017, Reed Street Park. We are asking, in order to maintain the viability of this project, to convert obviously the commercial use to deed restricted residential, but also convert the parking associated with it. It makes logical sense that when the commercial use goes, the commercial parking should be reallocated. Per the PUD, our alternative one parking requirement is 67 spaces, as we've discussed. We are planning to build a 34-space parking lot in the back. Again, you do the math, 34 plus the 45 that surround our property, so 34 there, and then these are our allocated commercial spaces, is a total of 79 spaces. This block between what is allocated to it from a commercial standpoint and what we're going to build has 79 parking spaces allocated to it. We only need 67. What does that mean? Well, if you draw it out here, it means that if we built our purely residential building with our deed restricted units here and built our parking lot here, it would mean that we would only need 33 more on-street residential parking spaces. You can see we have more than that in our commercial allocation. These are extra. These are extra parking spaces, 12 in fact. But we felt that rather than putting those spaces on multiple streets from a management perspective, it made more sense to take those 33 spaces, of which come from our 45, put them on the back to get to our 67, and liberate these much more commercially facing parking spaces for the businesses that might need them and for TACAW. That sounds pretty simple, right? We had 45 spaces, we only need 33. You're like, oh, but what about TACAW, our favorite subject? And we are, for the record, big fans of TACAW, and we hope it works. Obviously, TACAW uses on-street parking. That was the way it was designed. According to the town's own analysis done 18 months ago, the big event at TACAW, right here, this is from your own report that you saw a year and a half ago, the high scenario generates 350 attendees, and this is on obviously the bigger TACAW, not the scaled TACAW that we're looking at now. But regardless, who cares? We had 400 people present, and that was going to generate, according to that analysis, 217 spaces. Okay, so how do we park 217 TACAW partygoers? Right? Well, Takaw, if you look at the way their parking is designed, again, this is Robinson. You can see that Takaw is surrounded by 99 of its own parking spaces right here that have no other user. I know this number because we have to pay for the construction of these spots as part of our purchase of Block 9. So Takaw is got 99 spaces. Again, but that's not 217, right? Okay, so 217 cars. We start with 99 at Takaw, down here. Then what? We go on our block, Block 9. There are the 33 that aren't colored in. We have 42 other spaces that surround our block, okay? That have no other use. We don't have commercial. Our people are parking in the residential, so we go there. Okay, Stedman, it's a day clinic. Surgery center. The evening events, the weekend events, there's 70 spaces right there for Takaw to park at. And this is how the parking plan, the parking model was determined. Across the way here, on Tim's site, he's got his row homes here. There's no commercial here. There are 30 spaces across from those. Right there, you have 241 parking spaces that are totally available for Takaw. Takaw is a responsibility of the entire Willits Town Center. There are 8 other blocks that are responsible for their share of parking Takaw. I just showed you how 3 blocks, the closest blocks, which are the most obvious blocks for Takaw patrons to park at, could park and meet their peak parking demand. So, according to the parking consultant, we're in pretty good shape on parking in terms of parking amount. And the report that you had in your packet goes into great depth about that. Back in 2017, when you looked at the last PUD amendment, you were faced with the same question about parking. And in 2017, there was no shortage because in 2017, 46 parking spaces were removed. You voted to remove 46 spaces from Willits based on the same analysis, same guy, and to create Reed Street Park, to narrow Market Street, and to create this enhanced Takaw entrance here. That's 46 parking spaces that were removed based on the same analysis that nothing actually has changed from then to now. So what we are presenting, as James mentioned, what we're proposing is an adjustment to what we talked about last time, which is to purchase these 33 spaces from the town. We think that it was staff's recommendation or one of staff's options to do it this way. We see the reason and think it's probably the cleanest way to address this. That way we maintain them, we own them, and the town can take the $200,000 and work on the management challenge that's out here potentially, or do whatever they want. As we mentioned last time, there's nothing new. This isn't new ground for Basalt. With the Element Hotel, you gave them land, or you're allowing them to use your land to park 62 spaces. Instead of paying up front for that, they're obviously contributing lodging tax to the town. In this case, same deal, a community, a benefit, and we're paying up front instead of what you did there. A couple of concerns came up in the last meeting about how do we actually manage our parking? And we spent a lot of time with P&Z on this. Parking is a critical aspect of all of our projects, all of the 600 beds that we manage today. And in order to park in our projects, you require a sticker. All of our properties have those. The number of stickers are restricted by the number of spots. In this case, there would be 67 stickers. Not everybody, and it's clear in the lease language here, gets a car, is allowed to have a car. Your ability to bring a car to a project is completely separate. You have to sign a separate agreement with us to have a car. We disincentivize car use. And we match people with properties. So if you happen to be a river guide with the van, the boat, and all the other stuff, we're not going to put you at Willits. We have properties that have surpluses of parking and those that are tighter on parking. This ratio of parking is actually not at all tight by Valley standards. So we're very comfortable with this. As an example, I wanted to show you, and Bernie's here, and hopefully he might speak to this, his experience, but P&Z went and visited Club Commons. There are 4 buildings here that we manage. There's 275 beds. There are parking lots here for those beds, but I wanted to point out that very similar to Willits, and Bernie saw this, there are our employee housing units are near large parking lots for other users. And we have worked diligently with our neighbors over the years to make sure that our residents don't park here. This is actually, these are maintenance buildings for the golf course. These are fancy condos, hotels, parking. So there's tons of parking around here, and our employees don't park there. And it's part the sticker, part the relationships, but it's something we do every day. We manage parking at all of our properties. We have to. There is no extra parking anywhere in the valley. So this is something that, we're very familiar with. And if you do violate your parking with us, one of the things we talked about again with P&Z is when an employer has a list, a waiting list of 20 to 40 people for each unit, it makes it, the person in the housing is pretty committed to following the rules. They know how lucky they are to be in the unit. So we get really good compliance on our rules. And so parking's a big one. And Bernie's here, he might talk to you about his experience, but he thought it looked good and when he did his visit. And I'm not sure here. And so to conclude, as we talked about last time, in 2007, you mentioned that affordable housing was as important as your parks and your open space. I'm not sure if anything has changed since then. I hope not. In 2007, you asked employers to come to you and participate voluntarily. We are your largest employer. We are here. You asked us to come. If it's not us, then who? In 2007, you said you would revise the town code to make projects like this happen. Today, a number of municipalities voted on projects with big impacts. I think this project tonight is an opportunity for Basalt to lead by example, to contribute solutions rather than a growing problem in the Mid-Valley. In the end, our project is asking you tonight for the opportunity to create 148 affordable housing beds. It's just that simple. And we're asking for your support with the approval of the draft ordinance as written on Alternative 1.
Hey, thank you. We've kept some people here despite it getting later. And this is a continued public hearing, so we'll open the public hearing at 8:35 and invite people to come up to the microphone. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, state your name. So whoever would like to start, please do.
Hello. So I'm Carol Hawk from Willits. We don't have as many people here tonight as we did last time, but I was really impressed to see all the people that came out. We kind of circulated the Alternative 1, Alternative 2 through our neighborhood, and I think people were excited about Alternative 2, so they didn't show up. I gotta say I'm disappointed that Alternative 2 wasn't discussed tonight, that we're focusing again on Alternative 1, 6 separate bedrooms, and on-street parking. So again, I'm here to say that Alternative 2 is much more palatable to me as a homeowner in Willits who experiences parking on an everyday basis. I think the one thing with Alternative 2 is they should still be able to provide bus passes, and perhaps the rideshare should be installed. And I did read the letter from Ski Co saying that they didn't want to mix alternatives, but this is Basalt, and we need to make sure that this fits into our community. And I think that's what we need. I'm sad to see the loss of public housing for daycare workers and teachers, but I would hope that the 2 units that Basalt gets could prioritize daycare and teachers as you go forward. And as far as being smaller than some of the other buildings out there, when I bought 20 years ago, I knew what I was getting. I knew these buildings were going to be big, and I don't have a problem with what's there now, and I wouldn't have a problem with a bigger building with an underground parking garage. And again, I think for affordable housing, Alternative 2 is much more palatable, and I think that's it.
Thanks, Carol.
Yep.
Thank you.
Others?
Enid Ritchie, and I'm new to Basalt, 2.5 years, and I love living here. When I first heard about the project and heard that there was concern and negativity regarding the project, I thought, oh, sure, affordable housing is wonderful, but not in my neighborhood. And I really came in a more positive way in terms of affordable housing going into Willits. As I began to get more information, I began to think about parking, and I think parking is a huge issue. I think that it sounds like Alternative 2 has a better result for parking than was originally stated. But I began to think even beyond that, because I'm just this big picture person. And I said, well, gee, this is for employees who are working 20 miles from Basalt. What does that mean for our environment? If they worked or lived closer, we would be doing our environment. I'm losing my words, but our environment is important, and I think it's time that when we develop Basalt, when we develop the Roaring Fork Valley, when we develop Aspen, we need to think about developing it and thinking about our environment, which is a huge worldwide issue. And then I came here and I saw a letter from Jerry. I don't know Jerry Terwinger, who is not here. And he also was concerned about the environment. And I don't know if I would have put, I think Ski Co is a wonderful asset, as we hope our community is an asset to Ski Co. So I don't know if I would have put it there, but he said, and I'm going to say we are only concerned about global warming to the extent that it doesn't affect us. That making law or building or developing doesn't affect us. And I think we have to begin to think more globally and for the whole Roaring Fork Valley in terms of environment. And I wasn't planning to speak, but
thank you, Enid.
You're
Very nice.
Hi, I'm Kathy Click, and as a member of BAC, we reviewed this project at its earliest stages. And I was not in favor of the project being in Basalt, seeing as how what my colleague just said is that it's 20 miles away and you're increasing traffic and adding to pollution issues. However, Willits is a dense development, and I think that as someone who looks at affordable housing and the possibilities for housing all different kinds of workforce people in the valley, I actually support alternative one. I think that it prioritizes people over cars. I think that prioritizing people over cars is something that we should be doing as a forward-thinking, environmentally conscious town and community. And I think that anything we can do to encourage people to get out of their car and use mass transit and live a little bit more simply without all the crap that I have in my yard, would be a good idea. So I would support it.
Thanks, Kathy.
Hi, Scott McCard. Kathy, thank you. When I'm done flipping burgers, this is the company I want to come to work for. They're smart, they're innovative. Like Philip said, if not them, who? If not now, when? Now. I'm with Kathy, I'm with Ski Co. Thanks for bringing it to us.
Thanks, Scott. Others?
Hi.
Hi.
Guy Pisana, live in Wilkes. A couple things I'd like to know, but we're not going to get answers for them, but I'd like you to consider. I yet have not got the answer to how many of these 148 beds are going to be filled by seasonal employees. I think it's an important question. I think that seasonal employees will not contribute to Willits in any way. They'll be in and out. They won't be regular residents, and they won't be part of our community. So we're seriously looking at approving this project and allowing this housing, and we're excited about the idea that we can have more employee housing and live up to a commitment that was put out in 2007. But was that commitment put out in 2007 looking at seasonal housing, or was the Basalt Council looking at opening the idea of more restricted housing, longer-term residence? I think that was what was in the mind, and respectfully, they're bringing up the fact and reminding us that you guys were looking for this. But were you looking for this type of housing? And if it's only going to be seasonal employees, how much of it's going to be seasonal employees? Is it just one or two of the rooms, or is it 20 beds, or is it 40 beds? And remember, 148 beds doesn't mean 148 people. So these are the things that I'm concerned with, and I'm hoping that you guys take a serious look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Rick Sheriff. I live in Willits.
Hi, Rick.
I'm a supporter of Alternative 2. The parking, I'll leave up to you folks. I think the last point that Mr. Pisano made is very important, and that is if you have seasonal employees, they're going to be here for 3 months. This is a shopping center. Having housing can help support the shopping center, some of the businesses. Seasonal employees are going to be here for 3 or 4 months. I don't think they're going to contribute very much to most of the retail spaces, except for maybe the brewery, for parties, for young people, as most of us all were at one time. But I think you ought to take that in consideration and consider that possibly you require the ski corps that anybody who lives there has to sign a year lease and has been living in the valley for at least a year, so they're permanent residents who are going to be an asset to the shopping center and to the people who live around there. I think that's an important point, is who's living there, and can you limit that? The one other thing I wanted to say about the housing is the housing on Pioneer Street. How do you know some of those people aren't going to
park on Robinson Street. How are you going to police that? People are just going to run up, they're going to park there, they'll be a little closer. So I think that should be a consideration also. Anyways, thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
I'm Mike Mercatoris. I don't live in Willits. I live in Cypress Village. It's the next neighborhood over. I'm a former seasonal employee. I came out here to be a seasonal employee. I ended up staying. I'm sure there's a lot of people in this valley who have done the same thing. I think anything that we can do to help people get a foothold in this valley, establish and be part of our community is a good thing. And I'm willing to have it in my neighborhood.
My name is Brett Suma, and I'm a little nervous because I'm not typically negative, but so I came to the meeting 10 days ago, whatever it was, and I'm glad that the dog and pony show of the 60-year-old people living there wasn't repeated tonight. I did like the fact that they mentioned that Seco is the largest employer twice. I think that's important to understand motivation. But then I just went through all the points that were made. The gentleman said that the project fills a gap for Basalt. And my question is how? If the employees are SKICO employees and they're seasonal and they work on the mountains, how does that fill the gap for affordable housing for Basalt residents that work in Basalt? So I don't understand how it fills that gap. Alternative impact. So the larger building, the other option, the 93 units, I think is what he said. Well, those would probably be more than likely built out as free market. What is the alternative impact of free market? Higher property taxes for Basalt and higher income people that have higher sales tax revenue for Basalt. So the alternative impact is that you're going to get a more impactful building for the revenue stream of Basalt. He said that it contributes to problems, not solutions, but whose problems? What they're trying to contribute to or provide a solution to is SKICO's problem. And it's SKICO's problem of not having enough housing for their lower wage workers, and so they're trying to subsidize their lower wages by having this housing. It said progress towards our goals. Well, whose goals? The gentleman before me, a few before me, said that talked about the affordable housing as part of the Basalt's master plan, which is the last slide you saw. I don't think the intent of the Basalt master plan, specifically talking about affordable housing, was for seasonal employees that work in Aspen. I think the spirit of that would be affordable housing for the teachers that teach at Basalt High School, or the accountant for the city of Basalt, or any other person that works and lives in Basalt. So I didn't understand that. The incentivizes transit use. Well, we had the letter last week saying that RAFTA says that they're already over capacity in that lane and they have no ability to serve that incentivized transit increase. I happen to have an extensive background in transportation, so capacity is a huge issue. If they don't have the capacity, all of a sudden you're going to have 148 people now lined up at the Willits bus stop. And who's at the Willits bus stop now? Residents of Basalt that have invested, that are here, that are using mass transit to go to their jobs. Parking is already a problem. Well, they say it's not a real issue, it's an enforcement issue because that's Basalt's fault that Willits has so many cars and people parking there. But how do they enforce their 148 people? Now they give you a little diagram of how they do it in Snowmass. The problem is that you're talking about a much larger mixed-use development here. The purchase of 33 spaces is drastically undervalued for $202,000. They're essentially writing you a check for $202,000 and saying, you guys go fix the problem that we're going to exacerbate by building this. All I ever hear from them is about beds, beds, beds. And to me, I was not one way or the other in terms of the project as a whole, because I just had issues with the parking. The problem with just focusing on beds is that you're not really talking about quality of life. And really, when you start talking and thinking about Basalt as a bedroom community, it doesn't have to be a bedroom community. It doesn't have to have 148 200 square foot beds for workforce in Aspen. So this is really like an up valley problem that they're trying to push down valley. I'm not opposed to considering option number 2. However, I think that, and to Scott's point, and I really respect Scott a lot, and I love his family, to his point in terms of when and who and how, I agree that's a question. And so I think that number 2 possibly could get there, but in my mind, I don't understand how it really solves any of the problems or really adds to what Basalt is, your master plan, the things that you're trying to accomplish for Basalt and Basalt residents. I don't see how it accomplishes that. To the gentleman's point earlier about giving people a foothold into the valley, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think what you're really looking at though is Pickens County and Aspen's decisions to do certain things have pushed this issue further and further away from them. And so keeping things at arm's length from them, they can't afford to do this project in Aspen or in Pickens County. Closer up to where they're at. They just can't afford to do it. Maybe they should go back and consider how they pay their employees, how they incentivize their employees, and I know my time's up, but
It is.
I just wanted to rebut all the comments, but I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else?
I'm Doug Grant. I'm a little disappointed that alternate 2 wasn't talked about too much tonight. I'm more in favor of alternate 2. I think it's more in line with what we wanted to do in Willits. It was brought up last time, maybe I shouldn't say anything, but if the building was built out by right, there'd be a lot more rooms, bedrooms, people there than now. And we have, as it comes up, may need 500 units for Basalt. And I'm with some of the people that spoke here tonight that the master plan and stuff was looking at Basalt. We need to satisfy our needs for housing before we look at housing everybody else's needs. And I think that's the thing here. It's moving down valley when I think they should deal with it up valley. And Market Street or Pioneer Street, I think would be compromised quite a bit by selling. I don't agree with selling or buying lots for parking spaces or parking spaces. I think Pioneer Street will be compromised way too much to have purchased parking spots on that street. I look at alternate 2 to me is more like we wanted in Willits. It follows it more along. I'm not at all in favor of dormitory style housing, and I'm glad that they changed it from 6 people in a unit and so on. I think that's more appropriate on campus, and I feel the campus is up at the resort community at the end of the valley, not here. So I'd like you people to take into consideration that we need to consider our needs first as far as housing. Yes, I'm for employee housing and people to get a toehold here, but I don't agree with the Mid-Valley or Basalt being totally housing the employees that should be in Aspen as they develop more and more jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Anyone else?
Dan Grant, Homestead. I just listened to the presentation again tonight, and I view it as we're getting maybe a half a loaf in the sense of the building size. They want to be half, maybe they, in their budget or whatever, they don't have the money to develop the whole lot. As Kathy said, it's the densities there for them to do a lot more if they had the money they wanted to spend. So I'm suggesting maybe come back later when they have more money to develop the whole lot, underground parking, because after all, they are the largest employer in the area. They have a waiting list of 20, 30, I forgot what they said, 20, 30, 40 people on the waiting list to get into these places, so if someone messes up, they can get rid of them. Well, looks like to me they need more housing. Now, I don't like the idea of 148 affordable beds rather than housing, but we have to work with them, I think, somewhat. The other issue, I think, is the parking, and to beat a dead horse to death here, I thought, maybe my numbers are wrong, because, some timer sets in or whatever. I thought 30 years ago, people who were developing down here in Old Town Basalt didn't have enough parking. We were charging them $24,000 a spot so they could not have the parking. And I don't know what we were saving to put it somewhere, but then this 200,000, 202,000, whatever it is that they're going to give it, I don't think the town should sell the parking whatsoever, period. And that's not the way to go. If we haven't learned from history, our whole town is a parking problem. And every time somebody comes up with an idea, well, we'll pay for the parking. Well, I don't think anybody has enough money to pay for the parking. It's got to be there, to me, and the underground with this unit, and develop the whole thing as one giant unit. Now, maybe we can find a partner, come back later. I can see a lot of pluses in the project, but the parking is, like I said, a no-go for me at that time. Sorry, my eyes are failing. Let me look a little bit here. So I guess that'll summarize it up for you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Okay, two more. Bernie, after this guy.
Go ahead.
Okay, Bernie.
Hi, Bernie Grauer, member of P&Z, formerly on council. I think we have to look at the big picture of what Basalt, the direction it has wanted to go in, and the fact that it has put this through many iterations, through many councils, through many planning commissions, and we're working on a master plan, which I helped draft, and I can tell you, we did not parse whether they were seasonal or full-time employees. We expected a diversity of employees working for a diversity of employers with different needs, and we felt all of them were important and viable members of our community, and we needed to provide a place where they could live. There's two things. There's the public policy and there's the economic reality. We live in an integrated economic system with Aspen. We are a rural resort. That is our economy. 77% of Basaltines work in Aspen. They are us and we is them. And what helps Aspen economically thrive and remain economically sustainable does the same for its inhabitants in Basalt, in both in paying the employees' salaries and in commercial activity. So I think we should take off our blinders and realize that this is a unified valley. From Glenwood up to Aspen, it's all a rural resort community. And to be sustainable, you have to have service employees who can meet the needs and desires of the people who come here and want to spend their money. Otherwise, they're going to Vail if they can get service like they expect. So this is a duty of our community, not just socially, and it has always been a primary social goal to provide workforce housing, but I think you on council have a responsibility to look at our economic sustainability. As far as environmental concerns, and I think they're very real and very reasonable, the fact is moving toward the choice 2 with parking garage does everything to incentivize more car use and disincentivize public transportation. RAFTA planning director wrote a memo, said, yeah, we're going to be stressed and strained, but this Willits development is just a drop in the bucket compared to the planned and approved housing that's on the books in the Mid-Valley. And the whole community is going to have to react by being willing to pay more money to increase the RAFTA abilities. So this is a very long-term problem that we can deal with year by year, and it's not unique or it's not going to be hugely impacted by this one development. I think in terms of having a lot of people being housed, I've seen the development, the housing commons of Ski-Co. It is not a frat house, it is not a dorm, it is a good-looking apartment house that's well-maintained, well-kept up. There are not beer cans and other trash around. It is a very respectable, well-managed development. I think it's unfortunate that there will be some impacts on the immediate neighbors, but this is what we as a community decided, that Willits was the place for messy vitality, for delivery trucks, for restaurants, for bars, for people coming in and out, and I see this as adding to our community and not detracting from it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernie. Yes, sir.
My name's John Locke. I'm from Willits. Naturally live across the street from where this dormitory is proposed to be. That bothers me. I'm not quite sure how underground parking would encourage more car use. I don't know if you park your car upstairs or downstairs, but they said it would encourage more car use. I didn't quite understand that. I don't think that if this building was proposed across from him or you or you or you or you, that it would even have a chance of being built. It's going to decrease the value of I paid $500,000 for a small unit over there across from where this is going to be built. This is going to hurt its value. And I agree with this gentleman back here, said these people are really smart, and after listening to the spin that he put on parking, I agree, he's really smart. As listen, you know, I'd like to hear anybody here repeat what he said, because that was a tremendous spin on parking, and so I can't see the value in it, and I think it's too soon for us to have to check this box here. We come up here, we've heard so much stuff, more stuff tonight, then I think it's unfair for us to have to check one of these boxes that says we're interested in one or two, because should be a third alternative that we're not interested in any of those two. You know, there should be a third that we can have. And I think everybody spoke much better than I did. I was pretty impressed with that. But those are the things that I worry about. The parking is the big thing. The parking is already a problem there in the Willits. And to sell parking spots, to make it, how is that going to help? I don't understand how that would help anything. It'll make it even more difficult to sell them. If they would do underground parking, that would certainly help. And I don't think it'll encourage the extra use of cars to park them underground. That's all.
Thanks, Mr. Locke. Is there anybody else?
Can I read something from Brenda Wild, who is on the...
That's like another person, sure.
Is
Final,
that okay?
final.
I'll just read it like she texted it, so I won't
Okay.
take up any time.
Okay.
Okay, points.
SKICO is trying to rush a very important, this is for Brenda Wild. SKICO is trying to rush a very important decision. If they were working on something important, they would not rush into an important decision. Need the underground parking to support the vitality of the business and the future of the community. There's already no parking on the front side of these buildings daily, as they have parked cars every day. If these dorm rooms are going to be approved, then there needs to be a plan on the dark months when SKICO is not utilizing the units. Connect a requirement from town to fill in on months they're not using. This is still a dorm room facility, as they are placing dorm monitors in the building, security cameras to manage their temporary employees. Commit to long-term housing for employees and have town do the same. Best place for this is the KOA campground, where they can accommodate their employees according to their needs without impacting the vital residential and commercial core of Willits.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this public hearing is closed, and we're going to council comments. So, Gary, you've got a hand sort of up?
Sure. Thanks. You just went this way this time.
Yeah, I just might be.
Okay. I took a lot of notes, and honestly, I've been looking at this in a lot of different ways. And to me, this is an education opportunity for all of Basalt. I really think that when we created the master plan in 2007, we asked private corporations, we asked private developers to find innovative ways to do affordable housing, because we knew we didn't have an affordable housing tax. We knew we had a shortage of housing. You know, reality in my world is when I first moved here, I have a job in Aspen, and I live in Basalt because that's the closest community I could afford. And I really, you know, love Basalt. I spend a lot of my time here. I spend most of my money at the restaurants here. But it is a bedroom community for me, and it truly is. I mean, that's what Basalt is to me, and it is to about 70% of the people who live here. And so, you know, I look at this as this is a project that we should be encouraging. We have encouraged the Element to develop, and we've allowed them to put parking on our property. And that's what is there. If you look at Google Earth, you can see all the parking the Element has, and it's all private. But it is town-owned land. And so you got to look at the fact that we have done this before to encourage development. And I personally believe that, you know, the parking enforcement is the big issue. It's not the amount of spaces. I really appreciate the fact that they're putting all of the on-street parking on Pioneer Street. I think it opens up the other parking that is available. I would like to look into the cost of all of the parking. I need a little more explanation if this gets through of the number that was come up with 202,000. It does seem low to me, so that was something I want to look at. You know, seasonal people are not a detriment to Basalt. I think they've already committed to having their seasonal employees and then summer seasonal employees. They do this with their other properties, and they will do this with this property. They want people in these units. I think if you look at what can happen today without any approval from us is 96 residential units. And you look at it going, are they going to be seasonal full market people? Are they seasonal homeowners? Are they really contributing to Basalt all year long? I do not know. But I know seasonal employees because I was one at Rocky Mountain National Park, and the Park Service provided me housing. And guess what? I spent a fortune in Estes Park at the restaurants, at the bars, because I wasn't cooking. I mean, I would be out rangering all day, and I would go to Estes Park, and I want to hang out with other people. And so I truly believe they will contribute to Basalt economy, potentially more than the free market seasonal people, because I see a lot of change in the fact that we have a lot of potentially second homeowners. And how do you tell the difference? Can we tell the future development of this? You have to have full-time people that live here all year long, but we're going to do that to Skico? I think that's unfair. I really like the fact that we are prioritizing people over cars. I like that. Kathy left, but we need to, if we enforce parking better, to think we approved Willits and did not think in the future we were going to have to enforce parking regulations there is absurd. I mean, it's too big of a development to think that we could not get away. We've gotten really lucky because Willits has taken so long to develop. It's still got a ton of commercial that's not developed. So to think that is crazy and has to be part of the future thing. I think, honestly, putting in some less than 72-hour restrictions will change the way that places park now. And so I think we need to work on that. I think that's an opportunity. I want to see this project happen, and I really believe that this is a great opportunity for Basalt. Skico is a partner in Basalt. They have offices in Basalt. They have employees in Basalt. This is not all about housing down valley, up valley workers down valley. I think this will be a great thing, and I really hope that we encourage this and we move this forward. I think the reality is people, one guy said that I wouldn't want this in front of my house, you know what, if I lived here, I'd be excited to have this. You know, I live right near downtown Basalt. I approved the Roaring Fork Apartments. You know, I walk right near there. It's right near my house. And I don't have a problem with this type of development. The Roaring Fork Apartments have been a great asset to the downtown area of Basalt. That's category 1, category 2 housing. That's very low income housing. So I encourage more of this, and I'd love to see this move forward. And I will be in favor of this. So anyway, sorry. Go on.
Ryan?
Yeah, could you guys tell me is there any difference in the square footage that you had of the 6-person units to the 4-person units?
Yes, the 6-person unit is made up of 2 levels. So it's got a 1,200 square feet on the top, and then it has the other half below. So it's about a 1,550 on the 6. And then the 4 is similar to what staff and P&Z visited at Club Commons. It's just that 4-bedroom. So it's your I don't know if that answered the question.
The square footage per person.
So 1,550 for 6 and about 1,100 for 4.
Okay. How many total people live in the Commons?
275.
And then you had stated in your first statements about the costs going up between, I think, alternative 1 and alternative 2. You said alternative 2, it's going to go up 33%. You're going to have to rate, you then say, oh, your subsidies are gone for cars and et cetera, car share, but I think bikes is still in there, but bus passes. How much more are you going to have to increase rents then? You didn't really dabble in that. You said it was 500 and now we're going to have to be.
For my part, I think the math is pretty clear from the example Philip showed before, the Block 7. I mean, Block 7, you know, that housing does essentially what we were trying to wrestle with on alternative 2. When you go ahead and go full subgrade with that, with the parking, excavate under, build that out, and really see the additional costs and constraints of that kind of unit, that's what leads you into a 1-bedroom unit that's $1,700 a month. It's the same kind of exercise we went through and went, we can't do that any better.
But $500 to $1,700 isn't the same. That's a 200% increase. That's a 300% increase.
Sure, these are bigger.
Yeah.
So this is a 1-bedroom.
But so that isn't the number you're going to charge your employees, because you don't pay a lifty $69,000 a year.
No.
So,
Well, that's why
so
we
what are
wouldn't-
you going to charge then for these units if alternative 2 is, you don't have the number?
That's why we thought
You don't do it.
can't make it viable.
So is alternative 2 not a real viability at all?
For us, I don't think it is.
And we had, I mean, to be clear, we had hoped, so we had, again, we've been collaborative and open and working with the town throughout this whole process. And of course, you know, the information comes at different stages. And we had hoped that there would be efficiencies that would make some of that work. As anybody who's been building anything in the last 5 years, you realize it's just what you hope sometimes doesn't happen. And so we just got the latest numbers, and alternative 2 really is, it looks a lot like Block 7, but when you start to make it, Block 7 is this, I mean, this is a category 2-3 mix with a parking surcharge of $135 a month, which turns your deed restricted housing into, you know, $100, $150 less than free market. That's not where we want to go. So the form, to David's point, the forms are the same. The results are kind of the same. And we'd hope to find, you know, because we have small units, we'd be able to make it work. It really was a rude awakening.
Did you guys look for any partners in this? I know you say that there's no partners and it's you guys, but it is your need. I love that you guys are carving out stuff for childcare and teachers. You know, I think people should realize that going from the 8 deed restricted units to 2 deed restricted units, we're only losing 8 beds, still a lot, and we need all that we can get. But it goes back to the PUD allows 96 units. What about density? What about, is there other partners that could create a 96 unit building that is some of yours and some of this, right? Is there that mix? So then it's not all housing your employees, which I appreciate. I appreciate everything Aspen does. You are one of our biggest tenants in Basalt, one of our biggest property owners in Basalt.
Well, partners, unless they're public, are going to want a return and a competitive return on their investment. You know, if you're really looking for a partner, you got private choices and public choices, right? Private choices are going to be looking for a return on investment. We can't see or find that you really garner a competitive or an attractive return if you were to have a for-profit component here to subsidize the affordability of the other property. And we don't see a public participant that would or is able to come forward to do it. So we don't see how either of those options work. If you have to subsidize housing, we are subsidizing it. We're not really doing this for a return, that's for sure. We are in effect treating it as a cost of doing business. Somebody else, if they're a private partner, will want to make money on their money. There's not going to be a return for them. And we don't see a public participant.
Right, and to your point, when I first started this project, I made it enormous. I made it as big as I could make it. And there are also limits in my universe, and we had to scale back. So this is this balance, and we've been fighting, and Susan knows this, and James knows this, throughout the whole process. It's a really tenuous balance, and we tried an alternative that threw it out of balance. We're hoping that we can get this one back into balance and make it work and bring this project to fruition. But you play with any of the levers and you add units, more parking. What do you do with the parking? Oh, it's another garage. I mean, it's a really tight balancing act.
That's really all I have.
Bill?
Of course, I have a few comments.
Okay.
I'll begin by saying I participated in last week's hearing from one of the furthest places in the universe. I was in the middle of nowhere, Mongolia, with no running water, no indoor toilets, but I did have 4G and I could stream you guys without buffering.
That's scary.
It was pretty crazy. And having said that, rather than repeat all of the good things Gary said last week and all of the further things Gary said this week, I mean, again, I think that what you are doing and what you have done in promoting affordable housing, particularly the elements that provide for childcare, for professionals, that we want to have work here, the fact that it's transit-oriented and prioritizes people over cars, these are all great and they are entirely consistent with what we have adopted as our strategic framework. This is what we care about. I have been a little kind of just perplexed by, what kind of people say about the folks who may be your renters. I mean, people who live in group houses don't grow up to be delinquents. I lived in a group house and I'm on town council. I don't think I'm a delinquent.
So you are a delinquent.
Yeah, that's probably true. I may be delusional, but not a delinquent. But, I think that it is a completely legitimate question to ask who you are going to attract as your renters. But, the fact that the mountain is in Aspen doesn't mean that we are going to have only lifties. You guys employ an awful lot of SkiCo employees, or you employ an awful lot of SkiCo people in the Basalt office. And it is likely those, the young professionals, the people who are going to contribute to the company and to our town, who are more than likely going to be some of the occupants of these rental units. I guess on the question of kind of alternative two, keeping it really simple, to build more commercial space would be absolutely stupid. You've got tens of thousands of square feet of vacant commercial space across the street. To add more would be stupid for you, the developer, it would be stupid for us, the town, and this is before the tree farm gets built. So, that is a bad idea, and I think that should be dead on arrival. I absolutely agree that our parking issue is, again, it's real, it's legitimate, but it's a management issue. It's not a question of supply or the sufficiency. On the question of kind of the transport issues, if the SKICO employees who are living in the Willits property are indeed working in Basalt, then transport is less of an issue. But I'll have to say, when I read our packet last week and I saw that RAFTA was arguing that they didn't have capacity after just raising our mill, I was really mad. And I think all of us in Basalt should be really mad if RAFTA is now saying, sorry guys, we can't help your town grow. That's just unacceptable. But I guess the final technical point I have, you guys are being asked to do an awful lot of stuff that I put into the category of nuisance taxes. There are lots of little things that showed up that I just, I think it's wrong. We should be clear in our regulations, and we should certainly not nickel and dime you every step of the way with car shares, with bike racks, and all of these things. I ride a bike. I think car shares are great. But again, I think it's nickel and diming, as I believe it is with the Ritas in general. I have a general problem with Ritas because they're a tax. They're a nuisance tax, and they cause extra cost. And frankly, I think they are government overreach when we start to do things like that. The only final point is that I think we're due for a little bit of a mindset change in general. I think we need to start treating SKICO and its employees as allies in the town's growth. I think that you guys live here, you work here, you contribute to the economy, and it is SKICO that's creating the businesses that are creating the jobs that we want to build more of in our town. So you have my support in principle. I have some questions, but I'm very much in favor of alternative one.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, let's see if I can even read my notes here. First of all, I think you guys have tried. I mean, I'm sad that you brought alternative 2 when you really didn't mean it, because we all thought that that was viable, and I think we're excited about the idea that that was a possibility. I agree, as most of the people in this room, that SKICO is the flagship of this valley and the engine, the economic engine of this valley, but it's not a nonprofit. And so I am going to come in differently than the other folks have. First of all, we continue to call it affordable housing, but in reality, it fails to alleviate Mid-Valley's housing problem at all. We need still more units for people who work in Basalt. So I don't know that you are willing to address that at all, but it is company housing, and that's fine. You need to do it. From 10,000 feet, I would say what some other people have said. This will be a giant transportation impact and definitely should be closer to Aspen or in Aspen, or, I mean, ideally, given the environmental statements that SKICO makes, that's where it should be. I did accidentally speak with a business person who was in Willits. I was actually just having lunch with this person, and they misunderstood about the parking. I mean, you had a list of businesses who signed on, and the people I talked to said that they had signed on having no understanding about the fact that the parking was going to be on street, because they already have tremendous problems with commercial parking. I guess I felt like alternative 2 was much more compatible with the neighborhood. I don't think that the people who are in here or the people who are at home and are concerned about this are necessarily NIMBYs. I think that they really do believe that they would probably rather see the approved use by right than see this happen, because it matches, it's more compatible with the neighborhood. I would never support purchase of parking spaces. I have seen that happen even in this town, where a lawsuit ensued later down the road, because parking places that are on the street, people think are public, and I think they should be public. As far as the commercial, much of the reason that that commercial that isn't being developed in Willits is because it's gigundous spaces, where at one point in time we thought we wanted big boxes. We no longer want big boxes, and had those been chopped up into family-owned business size, those work. Those are still working downtown, and they are working out at Willits when they are built. So that logic doesn't work for me. I feel like the small-scale commercial would work. I think commercial on the first floor is absolutely what needs to be there, because we would make anyone else do it. I think that's pretty much my thoughts on this. So everybody else has covered everything else. You know, there were some questions about, like, how many months do you think the units will be rented? Because that is maybe partially why the numbers don't work. If it's only rented for 4 months or 5 months or 6 months, maybe that's why, you know, you get more income if you rent it for 12 months. So that's really my last thought. And I'll just wrap that up and ask for a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion. I move that the town council approve alternative 1 of ordinance 10, series of 19 on first reading, and continue and set the second reading and public hearing for June 11, 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
So we have a tie.
So we could, it's not approved because there was not a majority of a quorum. There could be a continuation of this first
Can I make a
reading.
motion to continue to
Yeah,
June 11th.
good idea.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right, thanks, guys.
What if we did an alternative?
I would wish we would be looking at that. Okay.
I said no to the second.
I said yes to continuing.
Where they are? I don't.
I thought you said no.
No, I said yes to continuing it. If it was for,
So it was, okay.
It was 4.
That wouldn't have mattered, so would have.
2 and 4.
Okay.
yeah, right,
Great.
right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just read this into the record. The next item is public hearing and second reading of ordinance 11 of 2019, an ordinance of the town approving a contract to buy and sell real estate for property located at 29 and 30 Shiny Mountain Way and providing for other matters relating thereto. Ryan and Jeff.
Yep, I think Jeff's gonna take it.
So this is an ordinance to approve a real estate contract for the sale of the town's housing property at 29 and 30 Shining Mountain Way. At our last meeting, the council approved this ordinance on first reading to approve the contract. That contract is with the Aspen School District. And the contract is in the packet, contains all the standard terms and conditions. We included a few others to accommodate some issues specific to the property related to water line easements, related to the current occupancy by some tenants. And there weren't really any other questions, I don't believe, from council on first reading. If there are any other questions for staff now, I'd be happy to try to answer them. This is a public hearing, so we should open up to public comment. And I think that's all.
We also have Yana Dillard here, who's the
right.
realtor who's representing the town on this, in case there's any
I
questions.
knew she
from her.
looked familiar. Okay, this is public hearing, so we're going to open the public hearing at 9:30. Is there anybody who has a comment regarding this sale? Okay, hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Go to council for either questions or a motion.
I move that the county council adopt ordinance number 11, series of 19 on second reading.
All in favor?
Wait.
Oh.
Aye. No, that's an aye.
Okay, aye. Opposed? Anybody opposed? Okay.
You raised your hand and I was like.
No, I was preempting the aye.
He's a preempter, for sure. So,
Next up?
we did that
Thank you for
one.
hanging out.
Yeah, thank you, that was fun.
7D right on time.
Hey, you're right. First reading of ordinance 12, an ordinance of the town establishing the Basalt Green Team as a formal advisory board to the town. Susan,
This is just in line with the other two ordinances that we adopted, formally establishing committee structure. Ryan had pointed out in the original analysis that he'd done in January that there were 3 committees that weren't adopted by ordinance as required by the charter, and this is the 3rd one, so this is the green team. Kind of uses the same format as the other ordinances.
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the ordinance number 12, series of 2019 on first reading and set the public hearing and second reading for June 11th, 2019.
good job. Second, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Subject to amendment of the language regarding should versus shall. This gets back, nope, this one still
That's a
says,
typo, then, sorry.
yeah, that's what I figured.
All right, thank you. I guess, is that it?
I think that's it.
We're adjourned.
Mayor,
Thank
move the
you.
town council adjourn the meeting.
Thank you so much for your hard work tonight, everybody.
And you guys did see that letter from Martha, right?
From what?
Yes.
From David Johnson, was trying to clarify.
Yes,
that
I did see
They
it.
will provide service, they just want